There is just one reality left. We are here and it is now. You get hold of that and hang on to it, or you might as well be dead.
Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch Live, where everyone is entitled to my opinion, and I'm Bill Stone. And tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, well, we may have some call-ins. I kind of doubt it. I have a lot to get through today. We will have the weekly Lancaster County, Nebraska virus statistics, which is where I live. We will be talking about alternative social media platforms, alternative secure applications. I have a bit of a kraken. If anybody at Parler wants to ever get in touch with me about it, God knows I've tried. But I do have a bit of a kraken for the Parler Amazon lawsuit. And we'll talk about my run-in with some Karens. Oh, was that just loads of fun. But this is a live stream, so even if I don't get to any calls tonight, you are still free to talk to me via chat. You can talk to me about anything that you want to talk about, whether it's political, social, the virus whose name I can't mention without getting my channel videos and channel deranked even lower than I already have. We'll just call it that unspecified virus of unknown origin. You can talk to me about Civil War II, which is continuing to ramp up thanks to the Democrats yesterday, or things relating to science fiction, fantasy, horror, superheroes, and other related genres. I'm happy to answer each and every question in as much detail and as truthfully as I can. There will be some personal subjects that I won't get into, but otherwise pretty much anything else is fair game. I get to as many of my viewers as possible with the understanding that I don't really want this to go much longer than about 3 hours, although to be perfectly honest, I have a fair amount of content tonight. It might run longer than 3 hours this time. I don't know. I will warn you in advance. I will be taking a bunch of this stuff out as clips because they'll make good videos on their own. There will be points at which I'm going to do that will cause me to essentially, sorry, I've got something in my eye, cause me to take a brief pause before I go into any given subject, but I'm going to pull some of this stuff out as clips. I will, as I said, I'm not going to give out the instructions for doing call-ins because I've got a lot going on tonight, so we'll see how that goes. Marshall says, it is the weak-minded and gullible that requires the safety of the mob's approval. This should tell you everything you need to know about social media. Oh, God, yes. Oh, I had a lengthy go back and forth on Twitter today about, guess what? Star Trek Discovery. And a lengthy back and forth. There are some YouTubers that are very popular, but they tend to be, in my opinion, wrong more often than they're right. Got into it with a couple of these individuals, and they claim to have all kinds of insider knowledge and inside sources and all that. And they may, I don't know, maybe they do, but it's impossible to evaluate. It's any time I go to do any kind of criticism of the press, the first thing that I do is if there's a story that says that it has unknown sources or unnamed sources or sources close to the whatever, I just throw it out because there's no way to evaluate exactly how accurate that is because you can't independently verify it. But there's some on here that are very, very popular and generally have been very, very wrong in their prognostications about the future of Star Trek on CBS All Access under that hack fraud Alex Kurtzman. Went back and forth with them about it for a while because, of course, they're saying, no, we've got inside dope. And I'm like, well, maybe you do. But for the last 3 years or so, you've been saying that this show's over and done with, and here we are headed into a 4th season. That is not a good track record. So anyhow, so I'll wait for a few more people to trickle in here. I will answer the question that nobody asked. What are this week's virus statistics for Lancaster County, Nebraska, where I live? As always, I source everything to within an inch of its life, and if you look at today's, you're going to see a lot of different links in there for different social media platforms, for articles that I'm going to reference, all kinds of stuff. One of them, I think one of the first ones-ish, if you look, it's the longest description I've ever had. But I always try to source this stuff. There's a great site that comes from the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services. Only suggestion is when you go to that site, switch from the default view to total deaths, because that'll give you a better picture of what the overall situation looks like. So this week's statistics, the total Lancaster County population remains at approximately 323,862. The number of tests is now up to 139,859, which is up about 2,564 from last week. As always, this is not a representation of a percentage of our population, but rather because a single positive test will usually trigger another one just to make sure they didn't get a false positive. Or maybe they'll get something that's inconclusive, so they'll test again. Hell, I know they've done tests on dead people, so those tests are not meaningful in terms of the number of people that have actually been tested. The total number of positive tests is at 24,348, which is up 909 from last week. This represents a continued decrease in positive tests. I mean, you're seeing there are more positive tests, but it's decreasing in terms of the rate of positive testing. The total number of Lancaster County deaths is all the way up to 132, which is up all of 4 from last week. Probably corresponds to the additional amount of positive tests, but it is continuing as a dip. We have a few more, but it's slowly going down in terms of the number. The deaths as a percentage of total tests is 0.943%, up 0.0013% from last week, statistically identical for weeks now. Deaths as a percentage of positive cases is down at 0.542%, down 0.005% last week, and essentially statistically identical. But it does represent a continuing lower downtrend. We were at about 0.3 for quite a while, kind of kicked up to about 0.5-ish, and are starting back down. Deaths as a percentage of the total population is 0.0408, which is up 0.0013 from last week. Down rather. Statistically identical. It's still statistically insignificant. More people die of, different things like traffic accidents, medical emergencies, things like that. In any given time period here, we're into about a year. More people have died than in our population than 132 that have died of this virus. As we can see tonight, I have my usual Hy-Vee flavored water, which in this case is white grape, and consequently comes in a green bottle that makes my hand and everything else totally invisible. So, one thing we're going to talk about tonight is I want to talk about secure, alternative secure platforms and applications. This really is because what has happened is that the President of the United States had his Twitter account completely deleted from Facebook. Oh, am I going to get into what Gab did about that? Because it's pretty damned funny. Gab is one of the social media platforms that I'm going to suggest. But getting into that because not only did that happen, we are now seeing across the board purges of deletions of followers. Kirstie Alley had 30,000 of her followers on Twitter evaporate overnight for the sin of being a Trump supporter. We are seeing longtime channels on YouTube getting trashed. David Cullen, his main channel, Computing Forever, is gone from YouTube for, I guess, because he was pro-Brexit or something. I don't really know. We're seeing other channels go away. We're seeing other users on social media being affected. Clearly, what has happened is our primary big tech companies have become outright fascists. They're just outright fascists. They're anti-free speech. And while they are private companies, and as a libertarian, I say, well, you have the right to do business with whomever you do or don't want to. So, okay, if you want to do that, I guess you can. It's a bad idea for a number of reasons. The primary one being that if you want to get people riled up and encourage extremist behavior, limiting their access to talk about the things that they want to access is one great way to do it. It's also incredibly selective. It is only affecting people on the right, libertarians, people like me. It is not affecting any of the multitude of Antifa accounts that explicitly call for violence. You can find them any day of the week that you want to search. They're not touching those. They're touching Kirstie Alley. the woman who played Savik in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. She's a Trump supporter, and so she lost 30,000 in one day. That's a high number, but it's not the only one. There's all kinds of other ones. They have taken Ron Paul off of Facebook. I don't quite sure why. I guess for the sin of not being giant government. My own personal feeling is that my days are probably numbered. I've always thought that my days are probably numbered here on YouTube, and the only reason they haven't kicked me off is because got such a small presence. I mean, I've got 350-ish subscribers, generally speaking, on my live streams. I don't crack double digits in viewers, so I'm too small to think about right now, but I'm sure as soon as they get rid of everybody else, they'll start thinking about people like me. So there's good reasons to go to alternative sources of information, alternative social media, and as I say, boy, did Gab outdo themselves on this one. Hey, Dalton, nice to see you tonight. Yes, I figure I've talked about this before, but two things. It's been a while, and a few things have changed, and so it's worth talking about again from that perspective. And, of course, we're now looking at really a mass culling of anyone who's about right of Che Guevara on social media and other platforms. And at the same time, my production values have increased. So where my videos were previously, when I was only 720p at about 10 frames per second, not as approachable for the average viewer. Now it is. At 1080p and 60 frames per second, it becomes a lot more approachable for the average viewer. So taking them out, particularly as clips, as I'm going to do, makes a lot of sense at this point. So what should you be looking for in terms of alternatives to these incredibly fascist leftist organizations that are going to do nothing but push for leftist causes and leave you, if you disagree with them, with nowhere to talk? Well, the first thing you got to do is forget about your search engine. Google sucks. Google, the entire alphabet sort of ecosystem. Alphabet includes Google, it includes YouTube, it includes, Android operating system, stuff like that. All of it is very heavily tied up in each other and is really kind of draconian. You can see it if you use, any of those platforms like I have, Android phone, obviously do a lot of stuff on YouTube. You can really see it when it comes to things like advertising. The advertising is incredibly targeted. You can watch certain videos. If you watch enough of them on YouTube, you'll start seeing advertisements across the Google infrastructure, the architecture that will, start showing you ads related to that stuff. YouTube will show you similar videos and things like that. But the advertisements themselves are very, very, damn it, I don't know why that happens. Doesn't seem to do any good when I try to change cards. It just goes away by itself, so I'm going to hope that it stays gone away. Anyway, you can see this in the advertising particularly. For me, it's weird. It's weird because as I've gotten older, they know that I'm single. They know I'm divorced. They know where I live. So the ads that I see tend to be things like advertisements for dating sites for older people. It's real fun when I get ones because I'm now old enough that I guess I would qualify as a potential grandfather. I'm not, but I do have a grandniece and a couple of grandnephews. So now I'm seeing sites for dating that explicitly reference the term grannies. Guys, really, seriously, if you want to get my attention, at least use the word mature or something like that. Women your age would be good, but grannies, this is not a turn on by any stretch of the imagination. Maybe grandfather age, but that's, the last thing you want to do is advertise me grannies. Not that it makes any difference. I'm a rather committed bachelor at this point, but But I see that stuff all the time. I see ads for, Viagra and things like that. I don't know why, because there's no reason for them to think that I need it. But apparently, statistically, at my age, you do. So they start showing me this stuff. I see local ads for various things that would appeal to my general age range. And I'm sure that other people see the exact same thing when they're doing their own stuff. A lot of this is tied up in the Google search engine. When you start typing things in, it keeps a record of everything that you've been typing in and hangs onto it and uses that to produce a snapshot of what you are for advertising purposes, largely. But it's still very, very draconian and weird and often outright creepy. For a while, I thought maybe I'd broken their algorithm because for some bizarre reason for about a week, they were showing me nothing but advertisements that were in Spanish. Guys, I don't speak Spanish. If you want me to watch your advertisements in a foreign language, try French. I might watch them then. But the Google search engine is terrible. It keeps records of everything that you type in, everything you ever search for, every website you ever go to. It's got some stuff in it that will send back information about where you've been and how you got there, what website where you wanted to get to this other one. Very, very nasty. On the other hand, there is the DuckDuckGo.com search engine, and I strongly suggest that you switch to this for your everyday needs. This has been a long time sort of building. It used to be that I wasn't entirely sold on DuckDuckGo. From a technical perspective, it wasn't always showing me things that I would look that were tech related, because I was in IT for a long time. Then it got better for that, and then really the only thing lacking was image searching. Wasn't quite as good as it was on Google, but now that's there. Go use DuckDuckGo.com, and they have instructions on the page as to how to change your web browser's configuration so that DuckDuckGo is your primary search engine inside of your web browser. So if you just go up to the address bar and start typing things in, it'll use DuckDuckGo.com instead. And what DuckDuckGo.com does not do is store any information about you at all, period. And it doesn't, like Google is doing now, it doesn't censor results. Google is censoring results based on leftist principles. You're not going to see the same kind of right-leaning or libertarian search results on Google because they don't want, they believe at this point, and frankly, they have good reason to believe it. They believe at this point that they have the authority to sort of, mold what you think about. And if you can't find those things and are instead given nothing but leftist sites that are the polar opposite of what you were really looking for, they think it's going to mold how you think. And they could be right. They could be right. One of the reasons, there were a number, but one of the reasons that Trump did not do well in this election, nearly as well as he should have, there really, in my opinion, should have been no question about it. But one of the reasons he didn't do well was because big tech propaganda complex and the media propaganda complex were extremely successful. I think the fact that they're now doing a culling of people who don't have leftist thoughts is indicative of the fact that they won. They really did win. They did an extraordinarily good job of molding public opinion. And so now they're getting into molding it even more. But DuckDuckGo.com doesn't do any of that. DuckDuckGo.com, you just type things into the search engine. It gives you results based on what you want to see. Very, very good search engine. Definitely suggest that you use that. Marshall's saying, one note, if you do switch default search engines, make sure to delete the Google tracking cookies. Otherwise, Google can still track your activities. Yeah, I'm going to get into that too a bit when I get into the browsers, but that's actually correct. What you really need to do is, if you go into your Google settings for your Google account, they have a listing of a history. Delete it all. Just delete it all. And also inside your web browser, delete all of your cookies and all of that. Because all of that stuff is headed straight to Google because they don't have any compunction about not doing it anymore. They don't have to. The reason that they don't have to worry about this anymore, by the way, is because government is not going to help you. It is impossible for government to help you. Government can't help you because government is filled with almost exclusively attorneys. They don't understand IT. and you can't get their freaking attention. I sat for 3 days in my senator's office. Senator Ben Sasse, who sits on the Judiciary Committee prior to the Senate being lost to the Democrats. But I would trade for 3 days to see him. I have repeatedly tried to get an appointment with him. It is impossible. Now, I've been in IT for 40 years. He could easily have taken advantage of my expertise, but he chose not to. And so when you see these morons questioning people from big tech, people like me just go, oh, they're being lied to. The people from big tech are, in fact, perjuring themselves. And these lawyers don't know anything about IT, and so they don't know that they're being snowed. They have no idea. They will not help you. No help is ever coming from government for this, okay? That's never going to happen. Never, ever, 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 ever going to happen. You have to do this stuff yourself. Government will never be able to help you. They can't. They don't have the expertise to be able to help you. So DuckDuckGo.com, absolutely where you should be going for your search engine needs. Don't use Google. Google sucks. Other things we can talk about is the social media situation. As I mentioned when I was first talking about this, our friends at Facebook and Twitter have decided that they should be the arbiters of what you see and the kind of speech that you can have. Again, they are a private company. I cannot say, because I know from working 40 years in the industry, somebody owns their infrastructure. They pay money for that. This is like a business. And just as I don't think a baker should have to bake a cake for a gay couple's wedding if they don't want to, I don't think that any kind of business online should be required to do business with you. I don't think that's a good idea. So they can do that, but we have to do something in response, which is leave. And believe me, if I could get the hell off of Facebook and Twitter, I would. They're toxic, they're horrible, they're clamping down on speech and all kinds of stuff. They're terrible. Problem is I run this freaking channel, and Facebook and Twitter have eyes, so I have to be on them for purposes of marketing my show. My show grows when it grows by word of mouth via social media. It's always important, by the way, that you like, sub, hit the notification bell, and share me on social media, because that's really how I grow. So I have to be on those too. But if I didn't have to be on them right now, if I was just going to screw you guys, I'm going home, I would be doing it. I would be off of those platforms. And instead, I would be on these. Minds is a good one for I guess what I would call kind of long form, robust types of things. You can make blog entries there. It's very good in terms of doing some cryptocurrency stuff behind the scenes if you're into that. It's good for what I would call kind of long form things, kind of like Facebook, except it's better in many respects. You can post videos there. You can post blogs. You can post updates. There are groups. It's a fairly robust infrastructure at this point. Mine has been around probably longer than some of the others. Is used by people like Tim Pool as one of his primary platforms. And others are switching over there as well. It's a very good one for, again, kind of long-form types of stuff. So, hey, Deliberate Zero, how's it going? Saw you earlier today when we were having a conversation, if I recall correctly. That's the common theme. The only people in the room who know what's going on would be an expert consultant who comes in to persuade the politicians to whatever view they were paid to. Well, what I told my senator, Joni Ernst, when I lived in Iowa, and what I told the nameless flunky who didn't know what he was doing, that I talked to from Senator Ben Sasse's office, was I said, here's what you really need to do in these hearings, right? Come to somebody like me, doesn't have to be me, somebody with my kind of experience. I will write out a list of preliminary questions. And then you have an earpiece, hopefully one that nobody can see, that is linked to me in the back, or somebody like me, in the back, behind the scenes, in the wings, and I'm listening to the answers to these initial questions and then feeding them follow-up questions. They won't have the slightest idea what any of those follow-up questions mean, but they would be the correct follow-up questions. And by continuing the correct follow-up questions, you go down a chain of questions that will eventually lead to, oh yeah, we're a-holes. Yeah, we censor stuff all the time. We cut out content we don't like, blah blah blah, which is what they always deny doing, and they're lying their asses off. Marshall's saying, I live long-form pieces, which is why Minds is for me. Yes, absolutely. Be joining me on Gab as well very soon. Yeah, I'm going to talk about Gab in just a second. Deliberate Zero says, I've enjoyed Minds, put off by the Facebook comparison for a while, but it comes across as properly neutral and principled. Yes. Yeah, I understand what you're saying there, Marshall. Yeah, again, it's good for long-form stuff. You know, if it's... And I shouldn't say just that. I mean, I post short things there as well. I cross-post to every social media known to man and not just these. I've got to have like 12 places that I market my videos to. But as I say, I can't get off of Facebook and Twitter the moment that the eyes are there elsewhere. I'm gone, dude. I'm history. I'm down in the archives. I'm all dusty. I'm a ghost. I'm Casper. So another social media site that is very, very good right now is Gab. Oh, my God, Gab. Oh, my God. Gab has experienced a massive, massive increase in their user base. What with the demise of Parler and disaffected users from both Facebook and Twitter who are looking for something else. And it's very good about that. I've been on it for a while, but I've started to get into it more directly now. And they did something. I should mention, again, they're in this rather huge deluge of new users. And they own all of their own equipment. And so knowing as I do what that entails, you know, servers, switches, routers, firewalls, all of this stuff, they have to be able to scale it up. It means buying all this new equipment, putting it in, configuring it correctly, getting it all to work and play well together. That is not a simple thing to do. And they were not expecting the surge. They were not expecting the surge at all. Gab's functionality varies from moment to moment, frankly. And it, you know, that'll calm down. I have no question in my mind that will eventually calm down. But while they're still getting this massive influx of users that they were not expecting, you know, they put in like a 24-hour period one time almost 2 million new users. That is astonishing. I've never seen that, and I totally understand why they're totally snowed under. One of the reasons that I am happy right now to be retired from that industry is because I know exactly what's going on over there right now. They are running around trying to get things done, working 24/7, catching a little sleep in the back corner of a data center if and when they can get it done. They've got a fair amount of chaos going on, managers that won't shut up to them. You know, it's a lot of hard work. Glad I'm not doing it right now. You'd be working, you know, basically 3 days straight with no sleep and eventually just keel over. You know, that's what's going on there now. They will get it fixed. They will get it figured out. So Deliberate Zero says the only reason you're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube is work relies on X or person Y is only on this site. Yep, absolutely. And yeah, don't envy the Gab, etc. scale-up team. Oh, it's probably everybody. It's what we would have called a, excuse me, I have something in my eye. It was what we would have called when I was wearing all hands on deck situation. Everybody's working hard. And it will get fixed. Right now, it is a little on the iffy side, but again, give them a chance. They are a good alternative for both Facebook and Twitter. Speaking of which, these guys did something really rather amazing. You know, Trump's account was essentially shut out, right? You tried to go that on Twitter, and it's gone. Gab, while they were in the middle of all this, managed to get all of Trump's accumulated tweets and videos and whatnot put over on their site in an account made right for him. Now, I don't care what you think about Trump, and he's not my favorite guy, in all honesty. But I don't care what you think about him, but I think deplatforming him is not a good idea. And so to have all of that stuff just appear on Gab, I thought was awesome. It was like, stick it to you, Facebook, up in Twitter, up yours. We got all of his stuff. Nya, 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 nya. It's awesome. Very, very awesome. I was pretty much sold on Gab anyway, but this totally sold me. Thought that was awesome. Hey, the Drop of Truth. You're on Minds and Gab. Yes, also in Parler, but that may never reappear. Going to talk about that in a minute, too. The MeWe is another site. It's not, for the longest time, it looked to me like maybe it would be more of a Facebook replacement. But what's happening with Minds and Gab right now make me wonder about whether there's a ton of viability there. I would still suggest that you get an account there. You can follow me there. If you go to my About page on my channel, you can see all of the social media that I'm connected to. But it no longer holds that sort of number one spot. That number one spot is now Minds and Gab kind of, together. Gab is intended for more longer form things. You can put, it's not just like tweets. You can put longer things in there. You can upload videos. Again, functionality is a little spotty right now while they ramp up, but you can still do things there. MeWe looked and felt somewhat more like Facebook. But again, looking at it now, I'd have to say that at the moment, as I speak, Gab is probably poised to take over for disaffected users from both Facebook and Twitter. Minds is another one. Again, it's been around long enough that it's pretty robust, and mainstream YouTubers do use that as a primary platform. Marshall says that Trump Twitter mirror is the primary reason you'll be joining Gab. You admire Gall. Absolutely. I thought that was awesome. Again, Trump, not my favorite guy, but damn. Grabbing everything that he had on Twitter and putting it into an account for him. Awesome. I hope he comes over and starts using it when the site is a little bit better. Main thing you have to remember about that is they have, I believe, a mobile app for iOS that is not available on the App Store. And they don't have a one for Android at all. Wouldn't allow them to put it on anymore. And so I don't think there's any development going into it. But it still has a very, very usable mobile website. If you're into the mobile website, aside from the fact that it's inside of a mobile handheld browser, you will not really see too terribly much difference. It looks and feels a lot like, if you were looking at Twitter on an Android app. So, definitely use Gab, Minds. Check out MeWe. I think it's worth checking out. It could go places. It has certainly a potential to do so. But at the moment, Gab is really, really the big, big, big one. Now, I'm going to talk briefly here about Parler. You know what? I'm not going to talk about Parler. I'll wait till I talk about the fact that I have a Kraken for the Parler AWS lawsuit that's currently in place. And I'll talk about some of my big misgivings about Parler. I've come to discover some things about it that have made me say that I will not be using it if it ever comes back, which frankly is largely in limbo at this point, whether it will ever be back. In terms of some other more alternative things, there's always BitChute. I use BitChute. In fact, I get more eyes there for my standalone videos than I do on YouTube. What YouTube does with me, I think, is it takes a look at my content, takes a look at what I am, and says, libertarian, we'll just shove that off in the corner. My viewers who, I'm not even clear that my viewers who have turned on notifications are getting notified when my videos come out and when my streams start. I know some of them are, but I'm not sure that all of them are, judging by the fact that I have 350x subs and never break more than a couple of double digits in my videos. So clearly that algorithm is not working in my favor. I think that's intentional. It's not inconsistent with what I'm seeing with other people with my general viewpoints. I think we're being pushed down by YouTube. Over on BitChute, for my standalone videos, I do get a lot more views there than I do. Problem is, because of various life circumstances, I'm not in a position where I can do a lot of standalone videos right now, and unfortunately, they are not yet able to do streaming on BitChute. It is on their roadmap. They have it out for beta testing for a limited number of users, of which I am not one, sadly. But the moment that they have it, you're going to see me, and I've been trying to do this for some time, simulcasting both to here on YouTube and on the Facebook and also on BitChute. Basically any others I can find. There are some other alternative video sites, but none of them seem to be quite as committed to free speech as BitChute is. One of the things you have to understand is that there are some people out there with pretty nutty ideas, pretty nutty ones. More than once, I have put up videos on BitChute that have garnered a certain level of anti-Semitism in the comments. Now, I find that anti-Semitism, obviously, I find that completely reprehensible, cannot support that. But when I'm dealing with somebody like that, I don't just dismiss them and yell at them. I don't think that's productive. I think what's productive is to take their ideas and simply walk it through with them. You know, they'll say stuff like, oh, not that many people were killed. And you're like, well, that doesn't really match what we historically know. You know, well, the Nazis and ovens and gas chambers and all that. And I said, well, have you seen, you know, the actual footage made when they liberated those camps where you can see all of the bodies and all of this horror that's over there? Do you not know that Auschwitz is at this point it's a museum that the German government keeps up as a historical monument to what horrors human beings can do with each other? Do you not know that the German government themselves says that this horror all happened? You know, I approach it like that. I say, wait a minute. What you're saying doesn't match recorded history. You know, I don't just, you know, call them names and tell them to get out, much as I might like to. I don't do that. I engage them. I try to bring them around. I don't think I'll ever succeed, but you do see that in BitChute on my comments, and I assume that happens elsewhere. But BitChute has a wide variety of stuff over there. Dave Cullen, who was kicked off here, has a channel over there. One of the nice things about BitChute is you can tell it to mirror your content. It doesn't, unfortunately, work for live streams. I've tried, but you can tell it to mirror your content, and that's what he's been doing since forever. So he's over there now kind of permanently because YouTube kicked him off. But they won't do stuff, you know, in terms of kicking people out just because you have a fringe, stupid, anti-Semitic idea, you know. I think that you're entitled to have stupid ideas. You are, frankly, entitled to be a freaking anti-Semite if that's what you want to be. But you're going to have me and lots of other people telling you what a jerk you are. And hopefully that will have some change of heart down the road. But I don't think it's appropriate to be censoring those guys any more than I think it's appropriate to be censoring conservatives or libertarians. So it is a very good platform in terms of being committed to free speech. And so I definitely recommend those guys. Let's see. Current top politics. The USA are farcical now. What a joke. I'll be talking about that in a little bit. Deliberate Zero says, hi, haven't been paying attention long enough to know if USA politics was ever any better. Yeah, it was. It's descended into chaos now. It's beyond farce, Marshall says, for a while back. Now it seems like one side is actively courting catastrophe. Yes, I'll be talking about that shortly. Diana D. Jarvis, hey, how's it going? Great to see you here tonight. A lot of people don't know how to turn on YouTube notifications. It used to be subscribing was enough. Now you have to do the extra step of hitting the notifications. Yeah, but even then, I think for channels like mine, people who even hit those, I don't think they're always getting them. I think more people have probably hit that notification bell than are actually getting notified that I've gone live or if I've dropped a video. YouTube is... Their algorithms are clearly acting against people like me who have views like mine. Conservatives, libertarians, anybody who's right of Che Guevara. Those people are getting deranked, demonetized, etc., etc. I'm not monetized. I don't have enough viewers. But even if I did, I think, you know, you'd have to be somebody like Daisy Cousins, who started out doing videos before YouTube got actively nasty. But even with her, interesting thing about that, a while back, she let it known that for every single video that she uploads, it is instantly marked as non-monetizable. And she tested this one time by uploading 5 seconds of her just with silence, nothing else, just silence. Nothing for the algorithm to grab onto. And it was immediately made non-monetizable. So she has to fight to get her videos monetized, and she's reasonably successful on YouTube. I think you have to be somebody who started out and got a following before YouTube decided to go nuts and try to purge the platform or minimize the voices of anybody who's not a leftist. So it's real crazy. Yeah, Drop Truth says a truly bizarre state of nation. Biden-Harris USA equals Leninist Russia. Well, I think what with all three branches are the first two branches of government, the House and the Senate, and the executive now being controlled by basically communists. I think we can look forward to an attempt to implement the Union of Socialist States of America, the USSA. I think we can look forward to that, unfortunately. The Liberate Zero says massive respect to BitChute. Yes, also used to be fond of VidMe before that one was discontinued. Yeah, it's hard to keep these up. You're talking about, again, somebody who was in this, massive amount of storage space. And BitChute tries to do it a little bit differently. You can get things set up so that basically it's kind of being hosted out of BitTorrent in the background in a way, but you're still talking about a massive infrastructure, talking about a massive amount of work on the front end. They don't have a official handheld app or anything like that, which is to its detriment. But it's growing. It is definitely growing. And again, for me, my standalone videos, I get more eyes there than I ever do on YouTube. If I was just doing standalone videos, if I wasn't, which I'm doing now is basically live streams every Thursday. If I was just doing standalone videos, I don't think I'd give a rat's ass about YouTube. In fact, when I was making primarily standalone videos, I would put them out on BitChute first. That was the first place I would upload them, YouTube being next. They are a good service. They're worth supporting. The interface is a little bit weird to get used to, but you'd be surprised the amount of content that you'll find over there from any political spectrum, even the ones that you will find offensive. All you have to do if you find them offensive is, stop clicking on them. That's the right way to handle speech that someone finds offensive in some way. Just stop watching it. When you know that some channel or another is spewing stuff that you find distasteful, just stop watching it. That is the best way to drive it down. Just don't watch it. That's what YouTube should be doing and isn't. It is intentionally destroying content creators like myself. Let's see. Drop Truth saying Season 3 of American Gods has finally arrived. Not one of Neil Gaiman's better books. I haven't touched that much. Marshall says, Bill, you're being banished to the algorithmic archipelago, trademark Marshall Presnell. Yes. Well, who isn't? Who isn't? Who isn't that is anywhere right of Che Guevara who is not being banished? Our social media platforms, big tech in general, have in fact become fascists who believe that they have the right to mold what you think. And this is the only way to fight them, is to get onto alternative sources of information, alternative media, more secure mediums, etc. Liberate Zero says, yes, I never looked fully into the torrent-like backend for BitChute or the blockchain behind Minds. Sort of tech is important. Yes, it is. And yes, if I were making videos, they'd go to BitChute first. Yeah, I hear they allow fans of reboots on their sites. They allow anything. They allow anything. They'll allow stuff that is, outright anti-Semitic. I've seen it. But that's the ones I click away from. That's the ones I will never, ever subscribe to. And there's all kinds of interesting ones where they have a lot of videos, commercial movies and stuff like that are either out of their fallen into the public domain or might be a little sketchy. It's something that they're going to have to come to terms with at some point eventually on that site, is they do have a lot of stuff on there that is probably still under copyright for like movies and TV shows and stuff like that. But you'd be amazed at the amount of stuff over there. I'm subscribed to a channel that does classic TV series. Oh my God, the things that show up there. If you know what the Little Rascals were, if you want to watch every single one of their shorts, they're all over there. So yeah, it's great. So BitChute, very, very good alternative. Then we can talk about secure applications, programs that you can run on your computer to make sure that things are a little bit more secure for you. Oh, pronunciation, I'm sorry, archipelago. Okay, sorry, archipelago. I have heard it pronounced different ways. Probably where I live is just one way to do it. So, anyhow, so we get into things like alternative applications, things that you should be running on your computer so that it's a little more secure, or things that you can add on to like browsers and stuff that'll make that more secure. The first thing you need to worry about is your web browser. It's the only thing you really should be using at this point is Brave, the Brave web browser. Again, lengthy comment description for this video because I source all this stuff. If you want to get Brave, it's just brave.com. You can download it. It's a cross-platform one. If you use Linux, there's a version. If you use Android, there's a version. If you use iOS, everything, it's got a version for all of them. It is a really good browser. It is based off of the same Chromium code base that is used for the browsers that are now behind Edge and Microsoft and behind Google's Chrome, except that it doesn't add in any of the nasty stuff that is tracking your every movement and sending things back to Google or sending things back to Microsoft to be used as evidence against you or whatever the hell they think. It's really mostly for advertising purposes, but it's still creepy, and it is still something you really don't want to do if you want to have any level of privacy. Brave is the web browser you should be using. Used to be we kind of had a choice between that and Mozilla Firefox. However, Mozilla has now come out in favor of becoming more leftist on their part, which says to me I don't want to support them. I want to support somebody who is totally 100% neutral, and that is Brave. Brave.com. It's the only browser I use. It's the one I use on my desktops. It's the one I use on my Android phone because there's a version for that. It is the default. You can't, unfortunately, just uninstall the default browser that comes with Android, but you can turn it into so that Brave is the default browser. It has instructions about how to do that, both for a desktop and for a handheld. So very, very good browser, really the only choice that we have right now in terms of something that is not going to actively try to screw you over or mold your way of thinking. Drop2 says, Marshall, North Americans teaching other North Americans how to pronounce English. Well, yeah, not all of us know. There's certainly words, you know. At least I know Chichi Rodriguez is not Chai Chai Rodriguez, which if you know the reference that is to, you get 10 points. Unfortunately, the points are just like clothes to an Orion slave girl. They just don't matter. Drop2 says, using Brave browser right now, my recommendation, yes, always use Brave. Deliberate Zero says, I approve of Brave, but as a Chromium-based one, I don't like its tab management. I hear there are extensions to help fix it. Yes, that is one of the coolest things, and I'm about to get into that. That is one of the coolest things about Brave, is that it allows you to tie into the Google Chrome infrastructure for add-ons without actually being Google Chrome. So any add-on that's available for Google Chrome is also going to be available for Brave. Uses the same store to do it. And of course, I never pay for anything in terms of my add-ons and stuff, so it works out well for me. Deliberate Zero says, I'm looking into Pale Moon and or WaterFox as a Firefox alternative because they still have minimum tab width. Yeah, the tab management isn't so great on that, but in Brave, but I figure, small price to pay for getting something that's going to be much more secure out of the box and is not doing all of this stuff in the background to either track what you're doing or try to mold your way of thinking, because that is what all of these guys are now attempting to do. Mold your way of thinking. They're going to try to make it so that all you get to be exposed to is leftist ideas, and that's all. This is what they're into right now. So Brave's a really good one. However, I also do have some other stuff that I use with Brave. Deliberate Zero says that's a strong selling point. There are plenty of extensions there. Yep, and if you're fine with Chromium, you'll have no problem with Brave at all. Yeah, in many ways, it doesn't look that much different than if you're using Chrome or something like that. But again, it's taking the Chromium code base that underlies these other browsers and not putting in all the crap that they have. Another nice thing about Brave is it has a built-in ad blocker. It's not the best built-in ad blocker, but it is a built-in ad blocker. It right out of the box, and you unfortunately you can't get things like Chrome extensions in Brave on your handheld. So this ad blocker for me comes in very, very handy. As many people who watch me to see any of my reviews know, very rarely do I actually pay for anything. I always say I have friends who allow me to view it. One of my friends is the Brave web browser. You want to watch something? You go into duckduckgo.com and you type in watch space quotes, whatever you want to watch, Star Trek Discovery, ends quotes, space online, space free. Boom, you get a million sites that are hosting this stuff. And you do sometimes have to poke around until you find one that's not full of ads. But out of the box on the handheld, the Brave web browser will usually cut most of those out for you. Now, if you want to have, let's go back to my comments here real quick. Marshall says, drop in this case, it's 2400 leading the blind. It's our way. Hell, it got us to the moon, so maybe it's a reasonable behavior. Yeah. But there are some add-ons that I just rely upon. On the desktop, it's just the first things that I install. First one is this one, Ghostery. Ghostery is a very cool add-on that it takes some of the tracking stuff that is being used by websites that you don't know about, because lots and lots of websites, not just Microsoft, not just Apple, not just Google, are tracking you without your knowledge. Ghostery will put a halt to almost all of that. It also has its own built-in ad blocker, which is better than Brave's. But that's not the main reason that I use it. The main reason I use it is to stop tracking. I don't want everybody in the universe know where I've been, know where I'm going, and what my patterns are. That's nasty and horrible and mean, and infringes on my privacy, and I won't have it. So Ghostery is what I use to stop it. It is inside of the Google. I forget, it's a Play Store, so you can pull it into that browser and install it just as easily as if you were using Google Chrome. Difference, of course, being Brave isn't doing a lot of stuff under the hood to do nasty things to you. Another one I use, because while Brave does have a very good ad blocker, it's not as good as other ones. The best one that I found is uBlock Origin. Again, it's sitting inside of the Google Play Store. You can download it and install it to Brave in a matter of seconds. It's very low weight. If you have a computer that's a little older, because I've had ones where waiting for the ad blocker to load takes forever. But uBlock Origin is very, very lightweight, very fast. Now, the cool thing about if you use these things on your desktop, you will never see another ad in your web browser ever again. It will make the internet experience much faster because of that. You would be amazed at the amount of ads. What happens is it's got these lists of sites that have ads, and it's constantly updated. And if it sees an ad trying to be thrown at you, it just doesn't. It just says go away, and it never loads. You will never see another ad on the internet ever again. And that includes, by the way, embedded ads inside of YouTube videos, which have become so intrusive that I now take advantage of a little kind of trick that maybe you already know. But I'll mention it anyway. If you're using, as I often do, there it goes again. I don't know why. Why is it doing this to me? I apparently just have to sit and wait for it to go away. Let me try going back to a different card. Nope, doesn't matter. Matters a little, but not much. So I may have to replace that. That's a nice background, and I like using it. I may have to replace it with something that's a little more static. But in any case, so not having any embedded ads in YouTube videos is awesome for me, because they're getting so many of them. It's getting so intrusive. But on the handheld side, if you're using YouTube's handheld application, well, there's a trick, and it works for me every single time. What you do is inside that application, you turn on autoplay. And then when a video starts, you immediately slide it to the end of the video. And that will usually bring up maybe a commercial or two, followed by a screen that will show you the next video it's going to show, and a cancel button. You hit the cancel button, and then you get that standard reload the video button. We'll reload it. Bingo! No ads embedded in that video. I assume it's a bug that will eventually be fixed. But as long as that bug exists, by God, I'm taking advantage of it. Because YouTube's ads have become so intrusive. It's just, for a while I was like, okay, I will deal with the minor amount of ads. But now it's like, God, all the time. In places that just break up videos in ways that you don't want them broken up. So that's a good thing to do. Turn on the feature that allows autoplay. The moment your video starts, just take the slider and run it right to the end. Hit the cancel button. Hit reload. No ads in your video. Reshow that round circle with an arrow on it. Just hit that, and no more ads in handheld side. Back on my thing here. Let's see. British English is a word-stressed language, while North American English is a syllable-stressed. That's probably true. Also, European Portuguese is word-stressed, and Brazilian Portuguese is syllable-stressed. Deliberate Zero says, I have a look at that. All I know is the word looks French. I put the emphasis on the second syllable. As for extensions, Deliberate Zero says, I have Privacy Badger and Decentralize running at the moment. Yeah, there are lots and lots of different ones you can use. These are just the ones that I like that I use, but there are tons of them. The thing about the Google Play Store is there are a million different add-ons that you can use. Mine I like, and I suggest that you use if you're new to it, but if you want to tinker around with it, find something that's better, feel free. There's only a million of them. Deliberate Zero says that's what happens when the algorithm tries to hijack your show. Well, no, what's happening there is this video is running through open broadcast software, and so it can get goofy. I have been experimenting around with. I've been liking using these non-static backgrounds that are high quality visually, but I have had that happen now about 3 weeks in a row. So I'm thinking maybe I need to change that. Marshall says, really, Drop, how do you say aluminum or aluminium? Both are valid. Or lieutenant. Axiom, all language is a flawed symbolic construct. Yeah. Aluminium, not aluminum. Yes, I know. There's an extra syllable when you get into Britain and some of her former colonies and stuff that does not exist in the U.S. English. The other one that I like to use a lot, and this is just a personal preference thing for me, it doesn't have anything to do with necessarily functionality of the browser, is Magic Actions for YouTube. And again, all of these things are linked to below. If you want to download Brave, it's there. If you want to install Ghostery, uBlock Origin, Magic Actions for YouTube, the links are all there. They'll take you to the right place. There are links to the websites for these that maintain them, but then they also have right there on the page a link that will take you over to the Google Play Store so you can grab that stuff and immediately pull it in. But I like Magic Actions for YouTube for a number of reasons. It has a lot of sort of modifications to the way that YouTube operates. For example, there's a special theater mode. You can increase and decrease volume simply by putting a mouse over a video and scrolling. If you've got a scrolling mouse wheel like I do, it'll let you just scroll that and up and bring the volume up and down. It does a bunch of other sort of internal little fixes that for me, just the way I tend to use YouTube a lot because I'm here, makes using YouTube a heck of a lot easier for me and a little more streamlined in terms of how I do it. So if you're doing a lot of YouTube, it's not a bad thing to look at. It's not a security thing. It's just, okay, this makes my life a little easier when I'm using YouTube. Okay, so in addition to that, we can get into things like secure messaging. There's really only one king of secure messaging right now, and that is Signal. And again, there's a link to that below. As far as I know, it is a cross-platform application. There is a desktop version. I don't really like it very much. There's a handheld version, and that's what most people use, is Signal. It provides end-to-end encryption. I use it as my main text messaging application, or if I'm going to send MMSs with embedded photographs or videos and stuff like that, I use it as my primary one. It is the default one on my handheld device. If you're talking with someone who is using Signal, it has end-to-end encryption, which means it cannot be viewed by anyone. Most of those applications are so open that if you put a packet sniffer, which is a certain type of hardware that you can put on a wire, if you do it in the right place, you're going to see the entire conversation. Signal, that's really impossible to do. Everybody in my industry swears by this thing. And if you watch Mr. Robot, which was the best depiction of, kind of hackers, hacker life and what they do, really good depiction. I loved it because it defied me doing any reviews. I tried a couple of times. It just defied it. But one of the things I really liked about it was a lot of the time the things that they were doing, that you could see them doing on the screen, made perfect sense for what the situation was. They used Signal. Now, not only does Signal have, secure communications between other Signal users, it also allows you to set it up so that your messages sort of disappear. You can set up a timeout so that you type in a message, goes to the other person, 20 seconds later, it's gone. So even if, say, you had something going on where your equipment was taken by law enforcement or someone else, and they were able to get into Signal, if you have those timeouts set, they'll never see that a message was ever sent. I would say, in a roundabout way, if you're interested in reading a book called The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, very, very good book, written by Robert A. Heinlein. It's science fiction, but it's almost a textbook for revolution. This would be a good application to use because it would be very difficult if you set it up right for anybody to know what's going on and be able to see what you had said in any conversations with anyone. Very, very good app, very, very secure. Absolutely suggest this over anything else on the market. Very, very secure. So that is definitely one that would be good. Let's see. Zero Dub says, saw a few episodes of that show, Mr. Robot. Absolutely agreed. It was impressively accurate. Yeah, it wasn't 100% accurate. Nothing is. But it was damn close in some ways. Very, very close. You could watch that and go, wait, okay, that makes sense. Even things like they would name routers certain ways. And when you get into the field, you discover that you name routers like I always did. I would name routers with the first 3 letters of any given router name, the location, the airport code of the location where it was located, followed by some identification that might show what type of equipment it was, followed by some kind of number indicating, which of however many were in the infrastructure was there. You would see that sort of thing on Mr. Robot. It was really good that way. Marshall saying, it won't be long before end-to-end encryption is outlawed. Well, maybe, but I suspect that our colleagues will probably figure out ways to subvert those laws. I would certainly suggest that they work on it. How about a jackalope review of Mr. Robot? Loved it. You've just got about all of it that I can do. Mr. Robot was a really good series, really odd ending, but it defies description. It's one of those shows where the best I can say about it is it's like Babylon 5. The first rule of Babylon 5 is you don't spoil Babylon 5. If you're going to watch Babylon 5, it has a 5-year story arc, very well planned out, and you cannot talk about things that if you know somebody who hasn't watched it, you can't talk about things that happen any later than what they've watched up to in that series because it will spoil the hell out of it. Mr. Robot's much the same way. You have to watch it and be engrossed in what the hell's going on before you realize, wait a minute, okay, there's this whole other thing happening. That is about the best I can say, is that it's really good that way. The characterization, the acting is all very good. It all makes perfect sense once you realize, oh, this is what's happening. But the depictions of what, the hackers are doing is another thing that makes sense. When they talk about how to get into certain networks, how we're going to break into the FBI's network, what they do makes sense. It makes sense. So that's about the best I can do as a review of that. There was a lot of symbolism in it. There were a lot of Easter eggs throughout. You could, spend days on any given episode just going through all of the stuff to research it, which is why I tried and then gave up. There was too much there to deal with. So Marcia says, and now all we need is a sentient computer with a penchant for liberty, and we'd be set. He's talking about the novel A Stranger in a Strange Land, where, yes, it hinged basically on him having a sentient computer. But if you read it, it's still kind of a manual for revolution. It's worth a read. Diana D. Jarvis loved reading The Moon as a Harsh Mistress, even though Heinlein has weird views on rape. I'm not sure what you mean by that. I'd have to have an example of it. Heinlein was obviously sort of a product of his era. Things that he wrote about back then. I know what you're talking about. You're talking about Friday, the novel Friday. He was very much a product of his era. One thing you have to remember back then is when they were, even when they were giving classes to women about how to, in the 60s even, you see it as a great episode of I believe it's Adam 12 from either the late 60s or early 70s. A very popular show. It's about a pair of uniformed patrol officers in Los Angeles and the stuff they have to deal with. And at one point, they were showing up for a women's class about how to fend off a rapist or an assaulter. And, they were doing things like, because back then they had these hair combs and brushes that had very, very pointed endings on it. They'd say, go into your purse, take one of those out, and aim for the eyes. Aim to maim this guy, aim to really hurt him. And their actual advice was, if you're not prepared to do it, the best thing to do is just lay back and let it happen. Because you'll probably wind up maybe walking away from it. But otherwise, go for blood. That was the sort of thing they were telling women at that time. So some of what you see there is his, and also in when you get into Friday in particular, you're talking about a secret agent, so it's a little bit different. This isn't spoilers. Go read anything that Heinlein ever wrote. The man was called the master of science fiction for a reason. His work is incredible. Go read it. It's awesome. I'm sorry. Yes, Mycroft, that's right. It's not Stranger in a Strange Land. It's Moon as a Harsh Mistress. But yes, great book. Drop Truths, Acts 1 and 2 of Stranger in Strange Land were very good, but Act 3 was ridiculous. Heinlein fantasizing himself to be a sex guru, really dumb. I don't know that that's necessarily true. It was just a very unusual novel. But again, I'm not really getting into that. That's kind of beyond the scope of today. I just suggest reading just about anything that Heinlein wrote. He was great. If you've ever seen any of the bastardized film versions of... God, why am I blanking on it? Starship Troopers. You will be amazed at just how different the book is. It's a very, very different kind of animal. Anyway, don't want to get too much into Heinlein other than to say read what he's got. Moon is a Harsh Mistress. Great book. So, beyond Signal, we get into email. There is only one choice on the market right now for email that makes the slightest bit of sense with respect to privacy, and that is a Proton Mail. Proton Mail is awesome. It's what I use for all of my domains. I have two, sylranch.tv for this show and wrstone.com for my personal site. I use nothing but Proton Mail. It, again, is very encrypted. It's so encrypted that not even the administrators of Proton Mail can see it. It's not based in the United States, so unlikely to be taken down for any length of time. Our friends at Project Veritas use it for people sending in tips and stuff. It has what's called PGP encryption, which is so far the strongest encryption that we have. Very, very good in terms of not, because Google, it culls through all of your emails. Google flat out reads all of your emails. ostensibly so that they can get a picture of you for advertising. Proton Mail, that does not happen. They do not read anything. They can't read anything. So it's a really, really good service. I can't recommend it enough. I use it again for myself for all of my domains. I would recommend it to anyone for any purpose. You can get a free account there, or in my case, I pay because if you're going to send something to, SYL Ranch at sylranch.tv, then I need to be able to have that branded for myself rather than using protonmail.com. But you can get a free account there for nothing, and you still can take advantage of every feature that they've got. So they're very, very good. Deliberate Zero. Let me get back to some of this stuff as I talk just about one more thing, and then we'll pop off into it because I'm going to get into other subjects. Another thing that you should have is a VPN. That stands for Virtual Private Network. Right now, and I know this as an absolute rock-solid fact by virtue of my having been in the IT industry for 40 years and having seen the equipment myself. And thank you guys, I am no longer under a non-disclosure agreement, so I can talk about it, which I couldn't do 5 to 10 years ago. In every data center of every social media network, Google, Facebook, Twitter, inside of ISPs, major ISPs, backbone ISPs, there is a thing that we call the NSA cage. That is where the NSA has equipment sitting in behind a walled-off cage. It's not necessarily a cage, but it's there so that no one can get into it. And what it does is it captures all data going in and out of those data centers, and it sends it to a Utah data center codenamed Bumblehive. This is not conspiracy theory stuff. You can look this all up. It's right out there in the open. The only thing they don't tell you is that they're capturing all this data and sending it there. They capture everything that you do. Every single packet that ever goes out on the internet is captured. They capture all your phone calls. Now, just to be clear, it's not like anybody's sitting there looking at all this stuff. What they do is they store it all, and they do what's called data mining. So if they want to know something about me, they basically say to computers, tell me everything about Bill Stone. And they get back a ream of paper that shows everything that I've been doing, every email that I've been sending and all that, which is why Proton Mail is something you should be using because they can't see it. It is encrypted. But Proton VPN, a VPN is essentially something that allows you to encrypt the traffic from where you are to some other exit point on the internet so that it's not going through all of this stuff where it's going to be captured by the NSA. And Proton Mail and Proton VPN, it's run by the same company, are not inside the United States. Cool thing you can do with the VPN, Proton VPN and others. There are a number of others. I use Proton VPN because I'm a committed Proton customer due to the fact that they have amazing email. But things you can do with it are specify what your exit points are going to be. So say, you wanted to watch Doctor Who as it airs in the UK. Well, the BBC disallows anyone with a non-UK IP address, which is how your computer is identified. It disallows them from seeing Doctor Who. If you go to the site from the US, you're not going to be able to watch Doctor Who. But with a VPN, you can specify an exit point that is within the UK. So now you have a UK-based IP address, and you can watch Doctor Who. This is not the only thing you do with it. Obviously, you should never, ever do anything in terms of piracy because that would be wrong. But that's just an offshoot of something you can do with like that. You can spoof yourself coming from completely different countries, and you have control over it. There are data centers all over the world that will let you use them as an exit point. But all the data that you're doing is encrypting and going to a foreign country where it's not being picked up at that point by the NSA and is not being stored. Also, a lot of the tech companies will store the things, your traffic, what you're doing. They don't have the ability to do it the same way the NSA does. The interesting thing about the NSA's data center, Bumblehive, is that they don't give out any real information about it. My colleagues, however, have been able to estimate the amount of storage space that is at Bumblehive based on the amount of power that's being consumed. The power records they can figure out, and they go, okay, well, if you got X number of power being used, what does that translate into in terms of storage devices? What they discovered is that there's roughly 2 terabytes worth of data for every single human being on the planet. Every single human being on the planet. And obviously, not every single human being on the planet has internet access in the first place. So clearly, they're mostly storing information about Americans. It's evil and twisted and awful and rotten, should never have been allowed to come into existence. And the reason that government will never, ever be able to help you with it is because those attorneys in government don't know what to ask. You know, they'll ask these guys, oh, are you doing something like this? And they'll say, nope, we're not doing anything like that. But they don't know the right questions to ask. They don't know the follow-up questions to ask that would show clearly and obviously what they're doing. It's nasty. It is horrible. It is absolutely something that they're going to use to try to bite us from the government side of the world. So having a VPN is a very good step. Using a VPN software is a very good step towards getting out from under that. It's not 100%, but it's a very good step. And you can use this also. VPN technology is something that's been around for quite some time in the commercial world. You know, if it used to be when I first started out that if you had, you know, multiple locations for the same company around the country, you would have to have dedicated lines between them. Well, then the internet got so cheap that what they would do instead would be get big, high-speed pipes out to the internet, but then set up VPNs so that the traffic going from one location to the other, nobody could see anything that was going on between them. You know, it would look like they were the same network or, you know, connected networks. So it's been around for a long time in that respect, and it's very good for something for an average person to have. Proton VPN has VPN clients, which you need to have for multiple operating systems, and I highly recommend it. There are lots and lots of other good VPN providers out there. I just happen to like Proton VPN because I'm a sort of dedicated Proton customer now because of Proton Mail. Let me go back here because I'm going to take off from that in a second. Let's see. Back to some of this. You've only read Half Space Who Will Travel. Definitely need to get into more. Anything that he wrote. Anything that Heinlein wrote. Absolutely. Starship Troopers had interesting take on vote. Only former military vets could vote. Yes. Heinlein, what you have to understand is Heinlein was originally a naval officer. He had a problem. I've forgotten what he contracted, but he had a problem that forced him out of the Navy. If he hadn't gotten that, Heinlein would not have become a writer. He'd have gone on to have probably a successful naval career. So when you see him writing stuff like in Starship Troopers that has to do with, sort of naval parlance and how this stuff works, that's largely from some of his own experience. And he said, okay, what if we extract this? We say, well, what if there's in the future a society where they said, this whole democracy, republic thing just doesn't work. What we'll do is we will make the people who have actually put their lives on their line for their country be the ones who can vote. And they're the only ones that can vote. So if you want to get the right to vote, you have to join the military and go through a term of service and all that. I don't know necessarily be something you do in real life, but it is an interesting idea from a science fiction perspective. Yes, Marshall, you're saying, isn't Proton Mail a CIA front? It is absolutely not. Yes, you can use standard email with PGP to encrypt it, but for most people, the amount of effort involved in PGP encrypting normal email is beyond their capability. PGP as a concept is a difficult one for people to grasp. You and I have been doing this since forever. And I've done it commercially lots of times. But I know from having dealt with users long enough that it's a complex thing for them to be able to do. It's better to be doing it, with something that kind of is handling all of the heavy lifting for you, which Proton Mail is doing. No matter which VPN you pick, get one with no logging and a subpoena canary at least. What that really is something where they either can't subpoena your data because there is some logging and stuff that could potentially be going on. You want one that doesn't do that. Proton VPN does not. Because you don't want law enforcement to be able to come in and say, I would like to see what's going on. You just don't want that to happen. Drop of Truth says, Canary is what Marshall says. Wait a second, hold on. Deliberate Zero says, like the analogy, it's a page that will be dead if something goes wrong. Yeah. My understanding is that even a gag order won't prevent you from taking a web page down. If the canary dies, you run. Yeah. Marshall says a canary is a reference to a coal mine. In mines, you'd take a canary. That way, if there was gas in there that was toxic, the canary would die first and you get to run. A subpoena canary is a document that's updated, does sort of the same thing. If you see that happening, you cut and run. So Marshall says every day or so with a sworn statement that no subpoenas have been received by the company. Under EU disclosure laws, it is illegal to make a sworn statement to mislead. But we're talking about governments now. And again, we're talking about governments that are run by people who are attorneys. So they don't know what the technological implications of what it is. And they never will. You will never be getting any help from government. That is impossible. Throw that out of your mind. Talking to your government officials about shutting this stuff down will always, 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 always be completely fruitless. You must do all this yourself. Drop Two says Bitcoin, $50,000 right now. Is Marshall selling? I don't know. Marshall and I have talked offline. What the price of Bitcoin really is at this point is kind of an indication of investors being scared. They're throwing things into Bitcoin because they're afraid of other alternatives right now. It's really high right now, which is great, but that doesn't necessarily translate into any actual increased real value. It just means that we're dealing with investors who are scared right now. Yes, if the canary's gone, they've received a subpoena as they can't make the statement legally. That's what that is. Yeah. Oh, it's at 38.5. I haven't been paying any attention to it because I've never had any money to spend in it. As anybody who watches the show very long knows, I really didn't think that anybody would be dumb enough to buy a few microamps of current sustained off a few nanoseconds of time. But clearly they were, and if I had a time machine, I would go back to 2000 and tell my earlier self, this is going to look weird, but when this stuff comes out, buy all of it, buy as much as possible, sink your entire fortune, tell your friends and family to sink their entire fortune in Bitcoin, and then sell it about now. I used to say the first week in December of 2017, but now this has topped it. But if I'd done that, I'd be absolutely a multimillionaire right now. Marshall's saying it'll go to the 50K range by mid-year. Marshall does a lot more of this investing than I do. I take his word on this. He's been right before about it, and I've been totally wrong. So I take Marshall's advice. So those are basically the major things that you can do to help protect yourself. Again, government is never going to solve this. It is impossible for government to solve it. Never look to them to solve it. It's impossible. If you have some thought in your mind about getting your representative to do something, put that thought out of your mind. It will never, ever, ever happen. It is impossible. Never happen. You have to do this stuff yourself. Find the applications that are more secure. Find the websites that are more into free speech. All of these alternatives are there for you. And it is not beyond the realm of possibility that these alternatives, especially on social media, will ultimately drive out the use of Twitter and Facebook. Nobody remembers, but before Facebook, the king of social media was MySpace. Anybody remember MySpace now? Facebook came in and completely took it over. MySpace was a growing social media site, and then Facebook came in and it sort of died. It's still out there. I have an account on it from way back when. I don't know when the last time I logged into it. But it's certainly possible that through just market forces, you saying, that's it. I'm done on these social media platforms. I'm going to something that is more free speech. Just doing that, if enough people did it, and given what's happening on Gab right now with their gigantic influx, I think it's very possible that we may eventually see Facebook and Twitter go the same way as MySpace. They're going to fight us along the way. They will fight it through every politician that they can bribe. Sorry, give campaign contributions to. They'll fight it any way that they can. But ultimately, these free speech alternatives have the potential to completely drive them back to the Stone Age where they belong. Let's see, Diana D. Davis. I remember hearing about MySpace, was never on it. Yeah, I'm just old enough that I predate Google. I predated as a search engine when I got into it, when internet first became something where it was essentially, I always say the internet has literally, and I never use the word literally figuratively, I mean literally, the internet literally has the entire accumulated knowledge, the sum total of knowledge and wisdom of the entire human race on it. So in the 1990s, when the internet was starting to take off and there was no search engines, I used to use one called Alta Vista. Marshall might remember that. But MySpace was the preferred sort of social media, the first one. It's basically dead, and there's no reason that Facebook and Twitter can't go the same direction. It's just a question of the number of people who will adopt it and then say frack you to the other ones and either never log in or just outright delete their accounts. Let's see. Remember hearing about MySpace. Marshall says, one more thing, get a detached firewall for your home and run pfSense on it. If anyone can get into your network, you're most likely bending over and begging for it. Yeah, you're talking about stuff there again that's very, very difficult for most people who don't do what we've done for a living to deal with. The best I can say is when you get a home firewall router, if you're not somebody who's technical enough to even know what Marshall's discussing there, when you get your home firewall router / wireless network connection, you're usually in one box, change the factory defaults. Change all of the factory defaults, give the thing a name that makes sense to you, change the administrative passwords, make sure if you know where to look, that there's no inbound connections allowed to you. I always, myself, if I'm looking for a new one, I will research it some, because there are some firewall router wireless access points devices that will accept an operating system other than the one that they were shipped with. That's not something to do for the faint of heart. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't do it. But I think my current one has got a third-party operating system on it, and that's intentional. So there are things that you can do even to harden those things. But the biggest thing is change the factory defaults. Just change them. Let's see. Diana D. Davis says Gab's even working on making their own phone right now. That'll be interesting to see how that works out. Diana D. Davis is old enough for MySpace too, but slow to get on any social media. Yeah. Marshall says predates the commercial web browser. Yes, so do I. Mosaic, you helped design that one. Oh, that's cool. I did not know that. Yep, that was the first web browser. And he and I both predate that, yes. Drop 2 says used ICQ and IRC back in the late 1990s. They still exist on the dark web. Sort of. I mean, they're out there. I've got an IRC client that I use because on September 11th, I worked for a bank that had offices in One World Trade Center. And for bizarre reasons, because I was the most knowledgeable guy at that time at my company, I became the interface between our offices outside of there and trying to find information about what had happened to our people inside. And at that point, there weren't a lot of, messaging clients, so it fell down to IRC. It was people in IRC going back and forth, and I was getting some information like that. Not a ton of information. In a chaotic situation like that, there's not that much to have. I will mention that our people did get out before the building collapsed, so there's that. But I sort of became the interface. People were coming up to me, for a couple of days, doing that. So I still have IRC. There are a number of different IRC networks. Each of them tends to have something more or less to offer, but I don't use it very much anymore. Diana Davis, remember using Netscape? Yes. Yeah. Netscape was stolen from Spyglass, which is who you worked for at the time. Oh, I didn't know that. But yeah, there's a lineage, the descendant now of Mozilla and is modern Firefox. So, Drop 2 says, what made me chuckle recently was when Google went down. Those Google Home controlled residences couldn't even turn on a light. What dolts. Yeah, well, you'll never find any of those connected devices in my home. You'll never find me with an Alexa or anything like that. I dislike. You have personal assistants on your phone. Siri being probably the most popular one, most well known. And I get that they make certain things very, very easy. I have a family member who has heart issues, and at one point we needed to get a 60-second counter. And rather than having to bring that up on the phone, she just said, Siri, give me a 60-second counter. But by the same token, we now know, my colleagues have proved this beyond a shadow of a doubt, that regardless of what your vendors are saying, those things are listening always, and they are always sending information back to the manufacturer. And that information is also always being captured by the NSA and is being sent to Bumblehive. So you'll never see one of those in my house. I have it as much as possible, turned off here. There's ways that they can get into things like your webcam on your camera, activate the microphone remotely, and you will never know it. Can't do much about the microphone, but what I can do is tape over my webcam's default camera, tape it over, which I always do. And when I'm not using my cam here for my show, my cam is on a rotating arm that I just spin so that it's pointed at a brick wall. It's not pointed at me except when I'm doing this. Let's see. Deliberate Zero says Microsoft doesn't even offer Cortana in your country, which is fine by me. Yes, absolutely. I don't think any of those things are remotely secure. Just imagine it's listening to you while you have sex. And depending on what your tastes are, imagine that the NSA knows what those tastes are. Imagine that if you've got Alexa, the vendor knows what all those tastes are. You're going to be listened to all the time. They are bugs. Marshall says, nothing beats a simple switch and never ever depend on an ephemeral internet connection. Yeah, if internet can go down, you can have outages in your area. They can have major outages depending on if a backbone provider goes down. That it's just nothing in my home is dependent on anything except electricity, and even that goes down from time to time. We had a fun one where we had a tree come down right on top of a transformer in our yard. It's like, get the hell away from that thing quick. We got live wires. Just go, get out. The Libertarian says, absolutely. If you need an internet connection to access it, you don't have reliable access. Yes, absolutely. So my next little thing, I've been talking for about an hour and a half already. I've got to talk about the Kraken that I have for Parler. I have been trying to get a hold of somebody at Parler since forever. I have sent emails to all of the appropriate people I can, including Parler's attorney. Parler, as you may know, was up-and-coming social media network, but because they were labeled as some giant hate speech site, which I don't think was 100% accurate. I certainly think there were people who were engaging in things that you might call hate speech. But again, for me, I'm like, well, let them say whatever stupid, ignorant thing they want to have to say is. Just don't listen to them. Or do what I do. Engage them and telling them what you believe does not make a lick of sense. Doesn't make the slightest bit of sense at all. You probably won't change their mind, but they usually will shut up after a while. So that got taken out because they were hosting on Amazon Web Services. Now, in my career, the latter part of it, I was doing almost nothing but Amazon Web Services work. And Marshall is doing Amazon Web Services work all the time. They're a very good alternative for businesses. They're very attractive because one of the biggest expenses in IT for a business is your own equipment, right? And this can range from, web servers to database servers to application servers. All of this stuff that you as a user don't see going on, but people like Marshall and I have spent years putting together. And there's if all you do is use the internet, you don't see the massive amount of effort and equipment that's going in to just serve you up a web page on a complex website. It's not easy what happens. So it requires all of this equipment. It's very expensive to do it yourself. So what happened at the tail end of my career was the businesses I was working for were discovering, hey, wait a minute, we can save all of this money. We can get rid of all of this stuff because Amazon Web Services provides us with database servers, web servers, application servers. We can set all this stuff up the way that we want to. Scaling it up is really easy if you set it up right. You can start out with a business that only needs 2 or 3 servers, but then like Gab, all of a sudden, bam, 1 million users come in. And Amazon Web Services allows you to scale it up very rapidly. And you only pay what you use for. I have several things that I do with Amazon Web Services that essentially the equipment that I use inside of them is constantly turned off. And I only turn it on when I'm going to be using it. As an example, my father had a psychological practice for about 50 years. And his business, he passed away, and so his business, he was a one-man business. So his business went went kaput. But because it was a healthcare field thing, we had to keep his equipment for 7 years following the dissolution of the corporation. There was a legal requirement. Well, I didn't want to keep all this crap around. So instead, I replicated it all up on Amazon Web Services so that in the unlikely event, and it's been several years, in the unlikely event that we actually need to access a patient's records, it's just a question of turning on these servers within Amazon Web Services, and bingo, I have a copy. And the amount of time that I'm going to have them on and the low scale of these things means I don't pay a dime for them. If I leave them on, well, I think I did that one month. I think I paid $4 or $5. And it's really cheap. It gets rid of all of the money that a company might pay for hardware people because you don't have hardware anymore. What I used to do I was an infrastructure guy. I was a systems administrator. I was one of the guys that got to physically put machines together, plug them in right, make them all work. Again, a lot of back end that you don't know is going on there, and it takes a lot of effort. And then I was also a systems administrator. I would, run the stuff that, the typing in of things that needs to happen in order to make a website come up. Well, if you're using Amazon Web Services, no hardware. All you need to have is administrators, and it really does cut the amount of money that a company puts out. It's very attractive. The downside is, if Amazon Web Services decides to kick you off, you have nothing at all. And that's what happened with Parler. They now have nothing. And as the last time I looked at it, nobody is willing to touch them. They are at this point probably down forever. They are probably kaput, just plain dead. Let's see. Rant on, yes, I have. Let me go back here. Marshall says he has a ton of home automation. Wait, got to get to it. A ton of home automation, but it's all locally controlled even by the computer. You have to remember, again, Marshall is... I was good at what I did. I made a decent amount of money. I was happy. It was all complex, and I could deal with it. Marshall's operating at a whole other level. He really is. Marshall's not in genius level territory, but damned close. He knows more about stuff than I do, and I consider myself pretty knowledgeable. Marshall's a very intelligent guy. So when he sets up this stuff locally, yeah, it's going to work great for him. But the average person is just way beyond what they can do. Let's see, how big is the UPS? Marshall says I can stay up 6 hours and 10 days for essential systems. Interesting thing about UPS is, just as a aside, I mentioned that the company I worked for in 2001 had offices in One World Trade Center. We had networking equipment in there, as well as a local file server for them. And whenever you set that stuff up, one of the things you always have to set up is monitoring. You know, what you want to have happen is you are notified about a problem as an administrator before the customer knows. So before our people in the office knew that they had a problem, I had to know, because I was responsible for administering that stuff. I always used to joke, you know, when I got into large infrastructures, that I was going to know that the apocalypse had occurred, you know, nuclear apocalypse had happened, by suddenly my being paged by all of this equipment that I was being monitoring, being sent text messages to in later times. Weird thing about that was, September 11th, I come downstairs, and the first aircraft had already struck the first building. And my ex-wife, we were married at the time, says, God, you got to look at this. You know, some plane went into the thing. Well, at that point, we're thinking, this has got to be some kind of, you know, single-engine craft or something like that. Something just screwed up, you know, not flying an entire jet into the building. But I turned it on and went, oh, that's weird. That's awfully close to where I know our offices are. Why haven't I been paged? Crap. I probably screwed up the monitoring. So I get to the office, and I'm walking from my car to the building, and then I'm paged. What had happened was the aircraft had crashed in such a way that our equipment was still up by virtue of our uninterruptible power supply, which is what that UPS that she's talking about there, that uninterruptible power supply was still providing power to all of our equipment, and the network connection was still good because of that. So finally it paged me when all of a sudden, finally, that connection broke, or the UPS finally died. I'm not sure which. It really doesn't matter under the circumstances. But I was like, wow, that stuff all actually worked. You know, a disaster came, and exactly what we hoped had happened in terms of being able to manage a disaster from an IT perspective. It worked. I was kind of, you know, proud of myself with that respect. While at the same time going, oh my God, I hope those people got out, which fortunately they did. President of a Tesla home power banks. I don't know anything about that myself. Marshall may have something. Gab says they have their own servers, so they won't get taken down again. And that's one of the things that makes Gab very attractive to me. That's why they're having trouble scaling up. If they were in AWS, they could set it up so it would auto scale up. But since they own their own equipment, which cannot be taken down, they can't have somebody say, okay, we're not going to host you anymore. You're gone, bye-bye. They have all of their own equipment. But the downside is that means that they're killing themselves right now to scale up. But what happened with Parler was Amazon Web Services said, you're a hate site. We don't like that. Goodbye. Kick them off. So Parler has filed a lawsuit alleging antitrust stuff as well as other things. Antitrust probably makes sense because they were kicked off of the Apple App Store, the Google Play Store, and Amazon Web Services within a very short period of time of each other. It's impossible to imagine that those companies weren't getting together and colluding to do it. But unlike the Kraken that they've been saying is going to happen for the 2020 election in the U.S. and never has and never will, I actually have a Kraken for them. I have an entire show about this. I have it linked to below. A number of months ago, a website called DonaldTrump.watch came to my attention. And at that time, DonaldTrump.watch was a Trump donor hit list site. That's all it could possibly have been. It was a list. You could just click on any location throughout the country and find nearby Trump voters. It had their addresses, their names, and where they were and the amounts that they had contributed. Now, all of this stuff is certainly it's absolutely true. This is public information. This is something that comes out from the Federal Election Commission. The idea was you want people to know if big companies are buying off your representatives, but what it turned into was this giant list of people who were donors. Well, that was bad enough in itself. But then it married it to Google Maps. So anybody could click and see exactly where a person lived. And worse than that, if you were on a handheld device and you tapped somebody's address, it would immediately come up in your device's default Maps application, which meant for most people, all you had to do then was ask for directions. And you had directions to these people's homes. This was absolutely a hit list site. Well, you can still see it. You can still see the hit list. I don't remember with maybe one of the things that I didn't put in as a description, but I will. The hit list site is still archived on the Internet Archive. You can see it. And it was just a hit list, period. Well, I brought it to Amazon's attention. I said, AWS, look what you're hosting. This is wrong. You don't want to be hosting this. Back and forth several times with AWS. And them ultimately saying, well, we don't interfere with that. You know, if our customer wants to do something like that, if you have concerns, you have to talk to the customer directly. And I said, good God, no. I don't want to talk to these guys directly. You haven't told them who I am, are you? Because I don't want to be on their hit list. I don't care now. But I then immediately phoned the Omaha, Nebraska FBI field office and informed them of what was going on. Within short order, and I don't know if anything that I specifically did cause it to happen, they started forwarding DonaldTrump.watch to Donor.watch, which is supposedly a more balanced one where you can find other people who voted for other types of things. But the site's totally 100% broken. It doesn't work. DonaldTrump.watch worked perfectly. You could find any donor. You find donors that had only done about $10 to Trump. It was a hit list site. Well, clearly, AWS has no problem hosting a hit list site. No problem whatsoever. But this other site that was not nearly as potentially dangerous, they kicked off. Well, that obviously indicates that they are being completely biased against this site, against Parler. Totally biased. Well, I've got the proof on this, guys. I have the documentation. I can go through it all. I can get you in touch with the FBI agent I talked to. I can let you see all of the emails that prove these guys don't give a rat's ass as long as it's something that can be used to kill Trump voter supporters. So, for God's sake, call me, you morons. I've been trying to get a hold of you. I've tried to contact. I've sent emails to everybody in the universe. This is a crack, and this is something you can actually use to drive your suit forward. Get a hold of me, for God's sake, you morons. Let's see. Diana, what happens if their internet provider cuts their account? Yes, there are other ways that you can cut that and drop it off the internet. But until such time as somebody actually tries it, you know, they at least have their own hardware, and that's a giant step in the right direction. Then Marshall's saying about the Tesla home power banks, that they're fine, but you can make your own clone for cheaper. Yeah, if you know how. And Marshall says, speaking of alerts, 2 of my servers are calling my name, hopefully back soon. Well, catch you later, Marshall. This is that's another reason that I'm not unhappy to be retired. The reality is when you're doing the level of work that I and Marshall have done, you are on call 24/7, 365. I was on call 24/7, 365 for over 20 years. I did phone support from downtown Disney. I did phone support driving across South Dakota. You know, I had to stop and, you know, plug in laptops and stuff like that on my way to places in my vacations. It's just awful. It's really awful. And he's getting bit right now, Marshall is. However, all that said, Parler, I will absolutely assist you in trying to get, these things taken care of. I will, because it offends my sense of justice that you are being kicked off when another site that clearly was more dangerous, AWS didn't care about, all right? I will help you to your heart's content. I will assist you as much as humanly possible. And that said, I cannot recommend Parler as an actual social media site. And here's why. I've got it linked to in my description box, but there is a story from the Associated Press, I believe. No, Gizmodo. called Parler Uses Breached Deep Inside U.S. Capitol Building GPS Data Shows. Here's why I can't recommend Parler. I will help them get it back up, but I will never be on it, and I will suggest to everyone that you not be on it. Because before they took out Parler from AWS, hackers who were barely trying were able to pull GPS information from every single video and every single picture that any Parler user had ever posted. Now, if you go to that Gizmodo website, you're going to be a bit surprised because it's going to show maps of the Capitol and the Parler users who had uploaded videos or pictures, and they're all over the place. This is one of those things where I look at it and go, I have a lot of questions about how last Wednesday went down. But when I see pictures like this, because Parler users have got to be mostly on the right, they were all over that Capitol. This was not a tiny thing at all. What I saw on videos while I was doing my live stream was nowhere near what actually happened. And because it was Parler users, you cannot convince me that there was not largely conservatives who were involved. But in any case, all of this GPS data was scraped off easily. The people were barely trying. And that says to me, what if some attractive woman using Parler were to put up a selfie of herself in her home? Well, now with barely trying, any maniac who might want to rape or kill her knows exactly where she is. I cannot recommend Parler because of that. That is a massive security flaw. And until such time as Parler comes back up and that is addressed, I can't recommend it. I will help Parler get back up because I think it's just justice. But I won't recommend that site. I can't. It is too insecure. That's too dangerous. You should not be able to pull that stuff off without even trying. Drop2 says, suggest a site for building such a clone. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know any about that stuff. Deliberate Zero says, I've seen Parler mentioned for many months, but it never appealed. Much like Gab, it seemed too closely tied to American politics. I'd prefer neutrality by principle. U.S. politics is so bizarre right now. I always say that my real heart is in science fiction and superheroes, fantasy, stuff like that. That's where my real heart is. But I can't just do it. Because unfortunately, and I have a video about this, there is no escaping the woke. Those a-holes have destroyed everything that I enjoy in science fiction. They have injected identity politics, woke nonsense. They find fault where none exists. They've created stories that suck. They've ruined everything for me, and I can't just talk about this stuff. I mean, even any opinion you have, positive or negative about something, is going to get called out by some politics thing. And so much as I'd like to be doing that, American politics is so bizarre right now that I can't. There is no escaping the woke, unfortunately. The Deliberate Zero says, that's what you like about mines. I just want the left and right to keep away from my hobbies. Oh, God, I wish they would. Unfortunately, having a YouTube channel where I have one foot in fandom and the other one in politics, I can't avoid it. They have just killed everything for me. I want to be doing just science fiction, but every time I try, every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in. It is so annoying. I would really rather just be reviewing stuff or talking about things, but I can't because every time you try, I had somebody go on a multi-tweet rant one time about how I'm a fascist because I like Star Trek, the original series. You can't do anything anymore, so I totally get what you're talking about. Diana Davis says, drop a truth, there are books and Facebook groups for DIY power walls. I'm sure that's true, yeah. And Deliberate Zero, you know exactly what I mean. Yeah, it's insanity. I can't get away from it. I can't get away from it. I've tried, and it's impossible. So, that's my cracking for you guys at Parler. For God's sake, if you're the attorney and I've forgotten your name, I have a link, by the way, to the filing that they have. look at your email. You know, any of the people that I've tried to contact, I get that you're in the middle of trying to deal with something. Look at your email. I have something you can actually use, and I will cooperate 100% with you on it. So, that all said, I get into something that is actually a little more fun for a minute here. Coming up on 2 hours. That's doing pretty good. I have something actually more fun going on here that I had happen this week. I had a run-in with some Karens. I had a run-in with Karens at a Runza restaurant. Now, if you're not in Nebraska, you probably don't know what a Runza is. Runza restaurants are a chain that is, as near as I can tell, I've never seen them outside of Nebraska. They actually started where I live now in Lincoln, Nebraska, and grew out from there. They have, restaurants here in Lincoln, multiple ones. Have them in Omaha, Nebraska. I've seen them all over Nebraska. But you don't really see them elsewhere. So to describe what it is, what their major product is, it doesn't mean it's a burger joint more or less, except they have one product that is different from everybody else, and that is a Runza. This is a Runza, a couple of Runzas with the ends cut off. It's essentially, these are their attempts, and I've had them, they suck. Sorry, guys. Giving them free PR right now. These are their attempts at vegetarian ones. They don't taste very good in my opinion, but then what vegan stuff does, or vegetarian, because this obviously isn't totally vegan. Most of the time they're filled with grilled meat with some spices. I usually get the ones with cheese. That is what a Runza is. It's so popular, in fact, that when I was in grade school and up all the way up through high school, they had some kind of deal with the Lincoln Public Schools where they would provide Runzas once a week for the lunch meals. It was, okay, it's Runza Day, and we would get these things. Freedom Fighter 57, hey, how's it going? Oh, first one on the way to Pioneers Bank on Van Dorn, a little shack. Yes, that's exactly right. They used to be just a little shack, and in my lifetime, they've grown into a fairly large concern throughout Nebraska. And they have, restaurants like the one I'm showing in here. So let me get back to the actual interior. So this is the interior of the one that I was at. I took this picture the moment after after I finished and I'd had this run-in with the Karens. Okay, this is an open dining room, right? A mask is not required in here. You're supposed to social distance, and so they have some of the tables and booths closed off to keep that social distancing involved. So I walk in, and I'm going down, this is just a straight shot from the door, to where you order. And I'm walking in, and there's some Karens sitting over here where my where that jackalope is sitting right now. There were some Karens at that table. And I wasn't wearing a mask because, it isn't required there. You don't have to wear a mask. And what would be the point? But here come these Karens, and they all see me. There's like 4 of them, 4 women sitting at this table. And they saw me without the mask. And it was instantly, "Where's your mask? Where's your mask?" And I'm like, it's an open dining room. They don't require them. "Oh, well, what about the people who are you're sending the orders with? What about them?" There's a big plastic shield. They're in no danger. And by the way, if you go through the drive-thru, they're just, giving you stuff. It's not even social distancing at that point. You're, 3 feet away from the person in the drive-thru window, right? And like, absolutely terrified. And, at that point, I'm like, well, think about this for a minute, all right? We're in this room. And I'm going to be eating. I think I sat down at this booth over here, and they're at this booth over here. I'm like, when we're sitting in these booths and we're eating, we have to have our mouths open. We're breathing. It's not as if our breath just hangs right here and never goes away. It all gets circulated around. And by the way, we're all using circulated air. The HVAC in here isn't just pulling it all in and dumping it all out. We're using the same air. Everybody who's come in here and breathed in and out, you're going to get some of that. And I'm like, okay, fine. If it will make you happy, I will go out and I will get my mask. And by the way, this is just a close-up pic, right? This is where you get your drinks, right? Standard sort of drink thing. Okay, note here that all the lids and over here, the far side of that, the napkins, at least one of the condiments, all of this stuff, anybody can grab those. They're just stacked up like you'd imagine. You always see, somebody could grab two by mistake. Oops, throw one back. I'm sure it happens. Like, all this stuff is happening, you dumb Karens. Why do this is ridiculous, right? You're getting all freaked out because I didn't walk in with my mask. So like, okay, fine. If it'll make you happy, I will go out and get my mask. So for those of you who don't know, that's my mask. It is a Halloween steampunk mask. I have a link to it below on Amazon if you'd like to buy one. My doctor has certified this thing. My doctor has said that's perfectly fine to wear. Covers your nose and mouth. None of this tubing is even remotely functional. It's just sticking there. It's my way of saying, if you watched the beginning of my show, you saw that we have really no problem with COVID here. I'm sorry. An unspecified virus of unknown origin in my city. We just don't have a problem with it. The number of deaths compared to the huge number of people, because Lincoln's a small city, but it's still about 320,000. We got, 130-some deaths? It's nothing. It's just nothing. So my doctor has said it's nothing to my face. She has said it's nothing. When I was last in a couple of weeks ago to speak to have it, because I got the diabetes, I'm slightly at higher risk because I'm older and I have diabetes. But I was in for one of my regular checkups, and the nurse who took my blood, we were talking about the stat, and she said, "Oh God, you have no idea. I constantly have to reassure all these patients that come in." And one of the hospitals that we use routinely, because we got hospital privileges there, they have an entire floor that's devoted to this unspecified virus of unknown origin that is empty. And the interesting thing about it is our lying press is talking about how all of our hospitals are full and overflowing. She's like, no, it's all lies. It's all just complete lies. There's no problem. We have entire floors that are empty, 100% empty. So I wear this mask. And it had its usual effect. I really should bring this in all the time. Because the usual effect when I'm wearing this mask around is that people will want to come up to me, talk to me, take selfies, and that gives me an opportunity to tell them that there's no real danger, right? To tell the stats that I give on the show, to explain why I'm wearing it as my way of being passive-aggressive in a city where we really don't need this, where we destroyed our local economy for no reason. We sent people into the poorhouse. For no reason. We have no problem. But this mask, even though they were previously doing that, the moment I had that on, they were like, "Oh, God, that's cool, fun mask, where'd you get that, blah, 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 blah." And then I was able to say to them the same things I'd been saying before about how we don't have a problem, but instead of, it works like a charm every time. Everybody thinks it's a cool thing to be wearing around. They don't understand that it's just about useless in real life. But my doctor says it's fine. They don't get it, but it gives me the opportunity to talk to them. And so I did that. I talked to the Karens through my mask. And you know what, Karens, if you're really all that worried, why are you in the dining room in the first place? There's a drive-through. Go through the drive-thru and you have no problem. If you're really that worried, go through the damn drive-thru, you morons. So that was my encounter with the Karens at the Renza restaurant. Get back to my thing here. Hey, Jeanette, how's life treating you? Diana Deve Davis, people have gotten obsessive about masks. Yes, they've been scared out of their minds and brainwashed. Yes. Again, this is, in my city, this is really not a problem. Deliberate Zero says, lucky I've managed to avoid all requirements for mask wearing without even trying. Hearing tales from the States has been dystopian for a while. It's the states are not dystopian. I explain this from time to time on the show. Infection vectors matter. They matter a lot. An infection vector is, how could it be transmitted? So, okay, you get to New York City. You have the most densely populated place in the United States. You have all of these, apartment buildings, which are all sharing the same air. You have all these people. You have goods and services coming in from outside the country that are never checked for anything. People that are coming in from outside the country never checked for anything. Multiple international airports, seaports galore. These are all massive infection vectors, right? Anytime that you have anything that's particularly communicable, it's going to run through our cities on the coasts worst. However, when you get out into what the coasts insultingly call flyover country, which is where I live, we have very few infection vectors. Nebraska is largely, the land area is largely agricultural, though its citizens are largely urban. We have one city that, our biggest city is Omaha, of about 1 million people. Nowhere near the kind of density. Same here in Lincoln, 320,000 people. Very spread out. Nowhere near the kind of infection vectors. We have no international airports. If you want to go outside of the country, you're going to have to, at best, take some kind of commuter from the Lincoln airport to, O'Hare. Most of the time, people drive to Omaha and take it from Omaha to O'Hare or someplace like that. Larger airports. We don't have goods and services constantly coming in. What we do have is I-80, Interstate 80 going through Nebraska, and nobody stops. Nebraska doesn't have anything to sell for. If you live in Omaha, you're going to have a normal job just like you would in any big city, but again, without the infection vectors. You just don't have them. If you're doing goods and services, you're going on I-80, and you're going to not stop. It's flat. It is one of the flattest parts of the United States. It's a natural prairie for a reason. It's a cattle country for a reason. It's a flat area. There aren't any, there are a few places that you might call tourist attractions, but it's not like anything like New York City, a giant tourist draw. Most people get on I-80 and drive through, stopping maybe to spend the night someplace or get gas. We just don't have the infection vectors. So when you look at dystopian stuff in the United States, what you're really looking at is major metro areas, generally on the coasts, that have really wide infection vectors, many, many infection vectors. It's not indicative of the entire rest of the country. Look at the map of the U.S. sometimes. It is really only these very geographically small areas on the coasts and a couple of the larger cities like Chicago or Denver that have many infection vectors, and so most of the cases are there. That entire rest of the country doesn't have a problem at all. It's like Nebraska. It's like Lincoln. Just not a problem. Diana, you're saying my mask is good. Yes, I like that. You can buy one for yourself. I have a link to it on Amazon below. Ran down to be first in line, or 90% false positive tests ASAP. Probably those Karens were. Yes. Sorry, I'm trying to get back to... Yeah, good to see someone's trying to dress appropriately for the apocalypse. Marshall saying back, have I seen the Veritas video dropped 6 hours ago with @Jack on Twitter? If not, I might want to interrupt and put it on. Yes, I have seen it. I will link to it below. It is awesome. Jack Dorsey, that dirkwad with the ZZ Top beard, was caught on camera by one of his employees explaining that they weren't stopping with Trump. Those guys believe that they have the right to mold what you think, and they're going to start kicking people off for a long time. If you're right of Che Guevara, your days are numbered. It's just that simple. Yes, go watch Project Veritas on YouTube before they kick the video off, which they've done before. Go watch Project Veritas. I'll link to it when I'm done. It's their most recent video, and it shows Jack Dorsey saying exactly what I said they want to do. Outright. He says they're going to deplatform people. He says this isn't just Trump. We're going to be at this for a long time, getting rid of this. Get yourselves over to an alternative social media where they're not doing that. Let me get into a more... Diana D. Davis, when people started wearing cloth masks last year, it was better than nothing, and people didn't know how dangerous this virus was or wasn't. Now people act like you're a murderer if you don't wear one. Oh, yeah, I was surprised. One of the reasons I go to that runs is because nobody ever gives a crap. Anytime I've gone in there, there's usually 2 or 3 guys who stopped in for lunch. But one of the reasons I go there, not through the drive-thru, is because it's never been an issue. This was the first time there was a gaggle of Karens who were freaking out completely because inside of an open area where anybody breathing around is going to be going to somehow be, connected with many, many people's breaths, completely freaked out. People who know nothing of science and apparently don't understand that when people eat, they inhale and exhale and sometimes sniff. Ridiculous, just ridiculous. Diana says masks are nowhere near effective for people to get hysterical about requiring one. Our governor has at various times required masks everywhere. He's currently requiring them almost everywhere except places like restaurants. I was at a sit-down restaurant recently. It's a buffet-style restaurant, which was just ridiculous. Just ridiculous in terms of what they're doing because, again, you're in a restaurant. Even if they space you out, you still are breathing the same air that God knows how many people that have come in and out of this restaurant have been breathing. It's ridiculous. It's scientific claptrap, and they don't know it. Let's see. Diana says, the weirdest part about the Veritas video is that Dorsey appears sincerely convinced that deplatforming people is somehow helping the situation, and it is absolutely not. Deplatforming them is the best way to encourage bad behavior, to encourage people to become more radicalized. If you take away their ability to just talk about things, then it builds up and it builds up to basically what we've kind of got now. We have been on the cusp of civil war for some time. And what Congress did yesterday, I guess, they spent a couple of hours yesterday impeaching Trump. Oh, God. Are you freaking stupid? I get that you want to be rid of him. I get that they think he has incited this. And I'll tell you truthfully, I've said it on other shows. I think a case can be made for that. When he put out a video today, and I don't know if it's on YouTube, but I've seen it elsewhere. And he looks generally kind of taken aback. It's a video where he says, okay, what happened last week was wrong. We don't want that happening among the right. It hurts our movement and all this. And he looks like somebody who just figured out that when the President of the United States says something, it carries an enormous amount of weight. For 4 years, he has had nothing but very, very combative tweets. And you can see it in social media. The people on the right have really responded to that. And I understand because they've kind of been getting screwed by the left for my entire life. But it's the President of the United States. And when he says to show up someplace and be rowdy, and then he stands in front of them and goes over the same stuff he's been going over that really pisses them off, and then says he's going to lead them down to the Capitol, but he didn't. There is, in my opinion, a case to be made there of incitement. That said, there's a lot of differing information coming out right now, and it's constantly evolving. So while I might have a feeling that direction, I'm willing to be convinced otherwise. I'll get back to this in a second. But I get that they want to be rid of him. But it just stirs up an enormous hornet's nest. Given the amount of time he's got left in his administration, guys, you morons, stop stirring things up. Just take a knee and run out the clock. I get that you think you're worried that he's going to run again in 2024. He might. I don't know if he's electable in 2024. I really don't. but he has been a victim, certainly, of the media propaganda complex and the big tech propaganda complexes who have spewed almost nothing but lies about him for 4 years, and it worked. There's no doubt in my mind that had those two entities not been constantly telling lies about him, he would have won re-election. And there may have been some voter fraud, but I can't prove it. I don't know how even to evaluate it, other than if you look at one of my other videos, I watched some guy who is supposedly in charge of the investigation on the Trump end to check out these voting machines. Guy's an idiot. If you know technical stuff, you listen to him. He's spewing technobabble. He's never touched these things. No one that he's ever worked with has ever touched these things. So all of his claims go out the window. You have to be able to touch the machines and deal with them. Get them on a lab. Put packet sniffers on. See what they're doing internally, and he's never done that. And he was spewing technobabble. So I know all that stuff. There's no way to even know. So I don't know for sure what happened. I know that there were many, many attack vectors, ways that people could come in and attack. And Project Veritas caught somebody in Texas who did it, who's now been arrested. And it certainly begs the question, geez, I wonder if Project Veritas had whistleblowers all over the country, what would we find out? There were lots of attack vectors that could have been used, but I can't prove it. Nobody can that I can tell. But when you stand there for 2 months telling people to show up, riling them up for 4 years, and then riling them up for 2 months, and then standing in front of them and going over the whole thing again, and pointing them at the Capitol, I think there's a case to be made there. Now I can have my mind changed on it depending on what data comes out, but it's constantly evolving, so I have to kind of watch it all, and it's not settled by any means. So even if you want him gone, if you don't want to make things worse, you just take a knee and run out the clock for a week. You don't impeach him. That was stupid. It's only going to stir things up. Nancy Pelosi is either an idiot or she wants civil war. I don't know which. Freedom Fighter 57 is saying we have Carhenge in Nebraska, a major attraction. Yeah, although its major problem is it's so far north of Interstate 80 that you kind of have to want to go there, and there ain't much to see in between I-80 and this Carhenge. Drop-a-2 says, you had 350 plus Twitter followers. Now you're down to around 270. Most that were banned were Christians. Why am I not surprised? You shouldn't be. Jack Dorsey has clearly said they're coming for you, period. Diana says, most businesses in my area require masks, even if local authorities don't. Yeah, it depends on the business. I mean, like we've got some, even when our governor hasn't required masks, there's a couple of national convenience store chains. And I understand what goes on there. I've been working for companies at large. They just say, screw this. We don't want to deal with individual states' laws and all that. We'll just make a policy. All of our stores do this. So that's true that's going on. And I'm sure there's other businesses that do the same thing because they'll get Karens coming in who are whining, oh my God, I'm going to die. Marshall says, if you drive a marginalized group of significant underground for no value reason, only God will be able to help you when they dig themselves out, and God takes sides. Quoting himself, J. Marshall Presnell. That's a good quote. Yeah. If you want to radicalize them, just make sure they have nowhere to talk. That's the best way to do it. If you want to get people to come out swinging, that's the best way to do it. Let's see. What do I think about fourth season of Star Trek Discovery? Well, the first 3 seasons sucked. I don't see any reason to think the fourth won't suck. I continue to believe because they won't publish any numbers about the number of subscribers to the streaming service or the number of people that are watching the Star Trek intellectual property. When you see them on TV, where they actually broadcast television, where they, in Canada and lately in the U.S., when they look at the ratings numbers, they're in the toilet, really in the toilet. So I continue to believe that probably the main reason that they continue to exist, it continues to exist, is because CBS and soon to be Paramount Plus has bet the farm on that intellectual property. That they cannot be allowed to seem to be failed. No matter how bad they are, no matter how much money it's costing them, they can't be seen to fail because there is nothing else on that streaming service that's worth paying dime one for. And the only people I think that are paying for this are diehard fans like myself who simply can't look away from the train wreck. But it sucked before. I can't imagine that it's going to suddenly change. It's being run by a talentless hack fraud, Alex Kurtzman, who failed upwards from the Universal Dark Universe, as well as some crappy Transformers movies and a number of other things. Look at his IMDb. He failed upward. So I can't imagine it's going to be any better. Some kind of pointless arc that doesn't always come through at the end like other series, stuff that doesn't make sense, doing an episode where you're basically replaying Die Hard. I don't imagine it'll be any good. Reading Nancy Pelosi, why can't it be both? Yeah, well, it could be she's stupid and wants to stir up a civil war. I don't know. All I know is that impeaching Trump was a bad idea, and my only hope is that the Senate will not have time to do it, at least during his administration, to convict him. I don't know if he'd be convicted when it goes to trial in the Senate, but, we'll see. I don't know what will happen with that. I think it's very likely. You have to get 2/3 majority vote. And I don't know that they could pull enough Republicans over to do that. But once Trump is out of office, you might see a lot of defections. I don't know how it'll go down. I just know it's a really bad, stupid idea. They should have just taken a knee and walked out the clock. Ran out the clock, that's all. Marshall says, your emoji review of Star Trek Discovery Season 1, puking, and all that. Let my viewers afterwards see. Yes, cross your fingers. Always cross my fingers, and I'm always disappointed. So, oh no, Kletzman's Clarice is happening. Why? Drop It True says, because in Hollywood you fail upwards. Marshall says, you can't impeach a civilian? Really? I wasn't sure if you could. They impeached him before he's out of office. I guess I don't know how that works. I've never looked at the Constitution closely enough to say if they could convict him even after he's out of office. If not, I assume within the next week we'll see some kind of verdict. One hopes that they won't be able to get 2/3 majority in the Senate, but he's losing support. There's no question of that in my mind. Drop True says the Harris novels, and there my background goes again. I don't know why. Let me flip to another identical cart and see if it goes away. Okay. And it didn't. Not really. Oh, come on. All right, we'll see if that works. Drop True says the Harris novels were rewritten via the series Hannibal. Why dredge up Clarice Starling? It will be a woke nightmare. Of course it will. He's a talentless hack fraud. He's made crap. There's no reason to believe that he'll ever make anything but crap. The reason that they've got him, I don't know. I don't know why they signed him to do another series. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. Impeachment's sole goal is removal from office. Once out of office, there's no one to remove. I agree. Maybe they're just SOL if they don't get a verdict within the next week. I don't know. But I wouldn't put it past him to try. I certainly wouldn't pass him and try. Same reason Nixon resigned, ineligible for impeachment. Oh, well, I've thought maybe that as much as it sticks in his craw, maybe the best thing to do would be for Trump to resign right now. And then Pence could pardon him for everything, just the way that Ford pardoned Nixon. And for the same reason, to say the country's been through too much, I'm just going to pardon him. It wouldn't make the Democrats happy, but what will? Aside from seeing him, dismembered, I think that might satisfy them. See him dismembered in a gory fashion. Other than that, I don't know what will satisfy them. I do have one other topic I want to discuss, and it was the reason that I had that quote from Planet of the Apes at the beginning. You are here, and it is now, and you either have to grab onto that and hang on to it, or you might as well be dead. The left exited reality in 2016. They have been out of contact with reality for 4 years. The right is now exiting reality in several areas. One of them is what went down last week at the Capitol. Let me see here. Diana says, I thought impeachment conviction would stop someone from holding office in the future. That's part of it too, yes. Marshall says, last thing Trump reads right now is a pardon. If he wants to run again, he'll have to run the legal gauntlet first. The propaganda complex is won. They just won. And there's no stopping them. They will continue to win. They have successfully convinced people of things that are not true, utter falsehoods. And they won. There is no coming back from that. So I don't know how he could win again. And if the Democrats, I don't know what they do in 2024, but I don't think he can win again because all of those propaganda complexes won this time around. Freedom 557, Pence would have the shortest presidential term if Trump is booted. Well, he'd have a short term anyway. If Trump was, convicted tomorrow, he'd have less than a week. That would be his whole term. He'd have a short term regardless. We just don't have any time left. Pence might be too ticked off at Trump to pardon him anyway. I don't know. I have no way to evaluate. I mean, you always see these stories coming out about how Pence feels this way or somebody else feels that way. And if you haven't been on my show for very long, if you look down at my my lower third, you will see a saying that I always use. This is 100% true. Nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. And what I mean by that is I have been engaging in a masochistic hobby that, as of today, I've been doing it for 41 years, where I debunk the press. I started doing this when they started doing stories on me and getting all the facts wrong. And that was when I was 15 years old. It is now to the point where, given about a half an hour, I can prove one of three things about any story from any news source in any medium. Either that the event being reported never happened, that it didn't happen as reported, or that if you strip away a slick interface, emotionally loaded language, opinion, and filler, you wind up with something that's maybe a couple of paragraphs in terms of actual facts. Nothing you see in the press is real. So when they talk about this stuff, one of the first, and I do this, by the way, sometimes I do it live on my show Cold, where I will say to a viewer maybe a day before or something, or the week before, send me an email. You can send it to call in at sylranch.tv if you're interested. Send me an email with a text news article from any source on the internet. It has to be text because it works better in terms of my being able to demonstrate things here. As long as you send me a text story from any source, I will walk through. I will not read it in advance. I will walk through and I will debunk it for you. And the last time I did this, in a major way, there were some others, but the major way, I debunked a weather report. That's just how bad they are. And the first thing that I do with any news story, if their sources are someone close to or unnamed sources or unnamed officials, tear it up and throw it away. If they don't have 3 named sources, then I'm not willing to believe that article. If you've got unnamed sources, God knows who they are. Maybe they're even spies or something with their own agendas. Maybe they're disaffected employees. Who the hell knows? But you don't know. You cannot independently verify that story. Unnamed sources, tear it up. So when we talk about all this stuff going on with Pence, all I see are a lot of unnamed sources, sources close to the vice president, sources close to the president. No, forget it. Nope. Nope. Right away, throw the article out. We don't know how he actually feels about him. Marshall says Senate is out of session until 19th of January. Trump is out of office on 20th. No grounds for conviction at that point. Prohibition of future office is a secondary item that only happens after removal for office. Yes, okay. I take your word on that. Deliberate Zero shaking your fist in the general direction of journalists. Yes, well, nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. I'll relink to it. I do it all the time. But one of the many, many, many links that I'll link to after the show is over is the 1931 version of a movie called The Front Page. Now, this is a story that is admittedly dark satire, but it's written by two then contemporary Chicago journalists. And all of the behavior of the reporters in that is from their own experience. If you watch that movie and then you update it for modern technology, what you're going to find is that nothing has changed. All of the sensationalism, all of the lying, all of it, nothing has changed. Nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. They can't get a story right if they're talking about getting a cat, a local fire department getting a cat out of the tree 2 blocks down. They will, I guarantee, screw up the facts somewhere. They can't do it if they're trying. And right now, they're not even trying anymore. All they're doing is just propaganda. But the problem is most people don't come out with that perspective. Most people haven't spent 41 years today am debunking these guys. I mean, it's literally second nature to me now. If I'm reading something myself, I'll leave that out, that's filler, leave that out, opinion, emotional language, there be all that. Okay, I got 3 facts. It's just second nature, but I can show it. Feel free. Send an email to call-in at sylranch.tv, which is what I usually use for call-ins. It's a public email address. Send anything. Next week, I will be happy to debunk it for you right live without ever having read it. Let's see. Diana says, good point about media stories on people's moods. I was thinking everyone has a breaking point. Pence has refused to invoke the 25th Amendment, though. I don't see any reason why you would. Trump may have problems in terms of potentially, anyway, inciting something, but he's not crazy. He's not incompetent. Oh, Deliberate Zero, time for you to head out. Night, everyone. Oh, good night. Myself, I've got really one major thing left to talk about, and then my back is already telling me I should get out of this chair. Drop 2 says Trump won't bother with politics after he loses. His wound will hurt too much. I don't know. I don't know what he'll do. He's very, very narcissistic. I mean, there's just no question about that. He's a very narcissistic individual. He might just go after it because he feels like he was cheated. I don't know. And the Democrats for the next 4 years are going to frack everything up if they don't cause massive. If those guys cause a civil war, here's what happens, right? I said it before on the show. I'm saying it for benefit of new viewers. The U.S. public debt is unserviceable. It will never be repaid. The United States is in debt more than every single country in the world since the history of civilization began. If you add up all of that debt, it doesn't come close to what the U.S. has done. Every single one that indebted itself even to a tiny fraction of what we've done has experienced currency collapse, followed by a governmental collapse, almost on its heels. There's no reason to think the U.S. will be any different. What keeps it afloat now is the fact that it's the world's reserve currency, that oil is traded in dollars, which means essentially dollars are backed by oil, and the world believes the U.S. to be stable. If we get a civil war, that's out the window. The world is not going to believe we're stable. They're going to look at our debt and say, holy crap, they'll never pay this back. Look at them fighting over there. And then they're going to stop using the dollar as the world's reserve currency. Oil will no longer back the dollar. The currency dies, followed by the government. And in between there somewhere, we get a major disruption or complete destruction of the food supply chain. Now, I'm in Nebraska. I have relatives who are in cattle ranching. My grandparents were. I spent some time out there. I have some conception of what the food distribution mechanism looks like. And it would collapse. And 1 billion people worldwide, because that's what we feed, 1 billion people worldwide would starve, including most Americans. Our cities would be filled with the dead. We would lose most of the U.S.'s 320 million people. If they do that Green New Deal, the exact same thing happens, because the people who want that are too provincial to understand what the impact of that would be on American agriculture. It would cripple it and cause 1 billion or so people, along with most Americans, to die. The survivors would be subsistence-level farmers. That's all. You're potentially looking at a freaking dark age. So if they provoke a civil war, that's what lies in store. If they do the Green New Deal, that's what lies in store. If they do too much of what they want for their communist programs, you will get a lot of starving people, and no food will be coming. So, Diana says, House actually voted to urge Pence to invoke the 25th. Yeah, they won't try to stop escalating. I don't see any reason to invoke the 25th. I have no idea. Drop 2 says, narcissistic to an extreme. Yes, he is. Remember Trump's apartment, designed after Louis the 14th in the film Devil's Advocate. Haven't watched that. Go watch the latest PragerU video on the falsehood of renewable energy. It's very good. Yes, renewable energy, green, is ludicrous for a number of reasons. I lived in Iowa for a number of years in the Des Moines metro area, which is very similar in terms of size to where I live now. East of Des Moines, along I-80, there's a giant set of wind farms. The only way that those really generate much power is if the wind is so bad that will cause structural damage to towns and cities around it. You're near tornado-type winds. And otherwise, they don't produce any power to speak of. Same with solar. It's called energy density. How much energy can fit into a small place? Well, a battery only has so much that you can fit into it before it explodes. And then when you get into solar and wind, they don't produce enough energy. It's ridiculous. If Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, always called Red Cortez on my show, if she gets her way, well, all I can say is she'll die right along with everybody else. She lives in a city. Marshall says, newsflash, at least one BLM agitator confirmed at the Capitol attack from the FBI. Documents regarding the surveillance of Trump in 2016, 2017 to be released earliest tomorrow. Well, that could be interesting. Like I say, this whole thing is a very evolving series of things going on. And the reason that I'm talking about this exiting reality thing, the right continues to not understand where we really are right now, right? They keep waiting for something, some kraken to be released that's going to reverse the election. It's not. That's not where we are. As of last week, the election, unless something happens like Marshall says, something would have to happen to radically change it. The election is history. That is not where we are right now. Where we are right now is we have to worry about what the left is going to do once they're in power. Biden will be the next president. You are here, and it is now. That's what we have to deal with. The election is now a non-issue. Don't sit over there thinking that it is going to be one. Don't keep believing that it is going to be one, because that way lies exiting reality. You are here. It is now. This is what we face right now. This is what we have to worry about right now. You stay here in the moment with what is happening right now. The election, done. We have to worry about what happens now. What happens when these Democrats, who now control all three houses, thanks to Mitch McConnell, you frickin' moron, we have to worry about what they're going to do. We have to worry about what's going to happen in terms of riling people up and maybe starting a civil war that will kill a lot of people. That's where we are. You are here. It is now. You grab onto that and you hang on, or you might as well be dead. We are not over there with the election anymore. You stay over there, you've exited reality. We are here now. This is what you have to worry about. Let's see. Drop 2 says, if we could develop an energy system powered by political hot air, that's inexhaustible. Oh, absolutely, yes. Diana says, people pushing the Green New Deal say planet is overpopulated. They probably don't care how many people will die. If they put the Green New Deal in place, they will die. The people who want that are extraordinarily provincial. They're the sort of people who call where I live flyover country because they don't understand that we produce their food. And it doesn't just magically, beef doesn't just magically come from, South Dakota to a New York City grocery store. There's an entire lengthy food chain involved that would collapse with the Green New Deal. And the people in the cities would be the ones that would die. I think anybody in a town over a couple of thousand would die. We all rely on this very complex food infrastructure that would collapse if they did that. They would gut agricultural productivity. That's what the Green New Deal would actually do. But they're too provincial. They only know what's going on in their big city. I've lived in Chicagoland for 10 years. I get this. They're provincial. They've never been out. They don't want to go out. They don't want to understand. They can't understand. So when they come up with crap like this, they have no idea what the consequences are and the fact that they will be among the dead. Let's see. Marshall says, I don't care who won the election. I care that the election can be trusted by all. I don't think you can say that now, unfortunately. Drop 2 says, why bother having elections in the U.S. anymore, or almost anywhere else for that matter? Well, as a libertarian, all I know is that, as Lord Acton said, power corrupts, and absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. And right now, people in the federal government, even your local mayor, like we have, they are corrupted by power. Those people have more power now. When Lord Acton said this in the 18th century, he had less power as a member of the aristocracy than our current people in office do. They have more power than he ever dreamt of. For him, this would be already absolute power. Hardly surprising that they're corrupt, and hardly surprising that only the corrupt and the corruptible ever run. I wouldn't run. I would never run. I don't want that power. I want to be able to say to people, the reason I'm running, if I wouldn't run. I wouldn't. The only reason you'd ever run is if I could absolutely say for certain, I'm about to shut everything down that causes these people to be corrupt and the corruptible to show up. But until that time, you vote out one corrupt individual and you tend to get just another one of them. Marshall says, right now there's at least 3 realities in play. The left side, the right side, and the factual side. If you're in the first 2, get yourself out quickly. Yes, the left has been out of contact with reality for 4 years. The right is exiting reality. Don't worry about that election anymore. Don't worry about any of that stuff. What we have to deal with now is, we are here, it is now, we have to deal with what are the Democrats going to do to frack up our lives, and what can we do to stop it. That's now. That's where we are now. Diana says, Republicans in Georgia ran very stupid campaigns, plus urban Georgia more blue than the rest of the states. Republicans would have lost Senate seats even if McConnell passed the 2K stimulus. Well, that wasn't his problem. His problem was he said to them, if you vote Republican, you get money. That turns people off. It turns me off. It sounds like extortion. That was a stupid thing to say. But I think that probably cost them the Senate, I mean. But regardless, it's that's all it is. They kind of did it to themselves. Republicans during my lifetime have always had an incredible knack for snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Not that the press and big tech helped any. They were active opponents of them, and they won. They were successful. but they still could have done things differently, for God's sake. Yes, as Drop True says, provincial types of imagine supermarkets are filled with magical processes. Yes, I ran into that when I lived in Chicagoland. The provincial attitude that they don't know how the food gets there. I actually knew people, reasonably intelligent people in my field, who thought that food was manufactured on site at the grocery store. Just so provincial and no conception of how things really work. Drop Truth asks, Bill, do you think Biden-Harris will implement a universal basic income, couple that with a social credit scorecard, and you become China? I certainly think that's a distinct possibility. It's a distinct possibility. You have nothing but socialists and communists now running the show. That's what we have to worry about, not the election. What are these socialists and communists going to do that will frack up our lives? And how do we stop it without causing mass death? That's the real problem we have to worry about. Freedom Fighter 57 says, I wonder what all the Q people are going to do when they figure out there was never a plan to trust. Yeah, well, that's another place where people out of contact with reality. All of that crap was just conspiracy nonsense. If you believe it, you're out of contact with reality. You are here. It is now. And now we have to worry about what they're going to do. Yeah, who cares? Well, it's just when people are out of contact with reality, we've seen it with the left for the last 4 years. When they're out of contact with reality, they start doing crazy crap. They get unpredictable. You don't know what they'll do. They go one way or the other. When you're out of contact with reality, you have a problem. And so many people now are. Marshall says, got to give the Q originator some admiration. It was one of the most ingenious uses of math and mass cold reading techniques to manipulate weak-minded people ever seen since John Edwards. Yes, John Edwards, the biggest douche in the universe award from South Park. But it was a giant conspiracy mess, and they are out of contact with reality. People who are still worrying about the election are out of contact with reality. People who are saying that it was nothing but people like Antifa and stuff who did the Capitol thing, you're also out of contact with reality. There may have been some there. This is one of those evolving situations where it's hard to say. May have been some there, but we can see from the maps that I've got linked to from Gizmodo that there were a whole bunch of people who were using Parler who uploaded pictures and videos, and you cannot convince me that many of them were Antifa who were trying to trick everybody. Most of the people who used Parler were people on the right. So clearly that is evidence of some of that. You're going to have to come to terms with the fact that the right had some level of culpability in this. Diana says, I'm kind of leaning toward do the universal basic income already and get the collapse over with. Oh, you don't want the collapse. I'm telling you, man, if you get the collapse, you die. It's really that simple. Drop 2 says, if the U.S. economy collapses, then the rest of the world will follow within days, if not hours. Yes, that is certainly a possible offshoot of that. Yes. When the U.S. dollar collapses, it will cause other major problems. But there are multiple paths to that, and we have to be very, very careful that we don't go there, which is why coming into contact with reality, both the right and the left, is important. I don't expect it out of the left. They spent 4 years being out of contact with reality. What they had, they called Trump derangement syndrome. I didn't like it, calling it that. It's a good enough thing as a shorthand. But my parents and one of my immediate relatives are in psychology. There must be another name for it. It's a psychological name. But they have been broken from reality. They have psychological problems. And so they have been mentally ill for 4 years. I don't know that you ever recover from that. When you're mentally ill, you A, have to know that you are, and B, want to seek help to try to stop it. Well, these people don't know that they're mentally ill, and they don't want to seek any treatment. Same thing is starting to happen on the right. You know, you don't want to go down that path. You don't want to be mentally ill along with the rest of them. I have been worried about what happens if statistically 100% of the U.S. is mentally ill. What the hell happens then? People on the right, people on the left too, please, for God's sake, come back to reality. You know, that's just all there is to it. Minutes, actually, is when it will collapse. Yeah, it relies on the U.S. Nobody likes to admit that, but it does. And the problem is there are multiple paths to get there, and it's possible to do it. It's also possible that we can avoid it, but that's mostly going to hinge on stopping the Democrats from doing what they want to do. They have stated what they want to do, and we need to stop it in a non-violent way. A violent way leads to a currency collapse, and in there someplace, a collapse of the food distribution infrastructure. You know, it's a thorny thing to navigate. Drop Truth says the Democrats seem to have forgotten their insurrection activities over the past 4 years. How convenient. Oh, well, there's obviously a gigantic double standard involved here. And I don't like it, but the fact is two wrongs don't make a right. I would certainly love to see the Antifa and the core BLM, who are communists, dealt with, and all of the stuff they've done taken down with the same fervor that they did with what happened last week at the Capitol. I would love to see that, but it's not going to happen. You know, thinking that'll happen is out there someplace. You are here and it is now, and that is not going to happen here and now. They control things, and they're coming for you, and you have to be very, very careful. We want to know what it is they're going to do and how to stop them in a nonviolent way, if that's at all humanly possible. Marshall says it's more an obsessive-compulsive disorder. Yeah, the object of deception was Trump for the left, at least last administration. It was Obama for the right. Both were highly augmented by non-factual information. Yes, that's absolutely true. Although I don't think I've ever seen anybody completely out of contact with reality the way we did the left. Freedom557 says some countries will fare better than others. Russia has been dumping the dollar for a few years and now has more value in gold than in dollars now. Russia has always been fed by the United States. During the Cold War, we could have ended it, and I know this because I live in a part of the country that trades with them. If we had ever wanted to end the Cold War, any time during its 70-year history, we could have done it. All we would have had to do would be stop sending them food. Communism and socialism cannot feed the populace. They had to get food from us. If we had stopped, they would have collapsed. If our food infrastructure system collapses, they starve too. We feed them. We always have. So, in terms of the right and what part they had in what went down last week, I'm a huge critic of the press, but occasionally I have to give them credit for doing something that looks well reported. There is an article that's linked to. It's lengthy. I certainly suggest that you read it. And it's from the Associated Press, and the article is Who Were They? Records reveal Trump fans who stormed the Capitol. Now, when you read this, you're going to see a lot of opinion and emotionally loaded language, so try to ignore all that stuff. Go and look at what they've researched. I would have a hard time debunking this one. Not because it wouldn't necessarily be possible, but because it is extraordinarily well researched. They have gone through arrest records by FBI and local police as to some of the people who were involved. They've got people who came from Des Moines who were involved. And they are, in fact, people who are on the right. Now, were there maybe some Antifa and stuff thrown in there? Yes, there very, very well could have been. But this article is filled with nothing but people who are on the right, clearly on the right. You know, they weren't Antifa. They were saying outright who they were and what they believed. And they were involved in this. They've been arrested. Some of them have been lost their jobs as a result of it. You have to be able to take some level of saying to the right, no, if you're on the right, no, some of my people did this. This was not bussing in a whole bunch of Antifa. There were clearly people on the right who were involved in this. How much, I don't know. Were there Antifa who came in? Maybe. I don't know. But if you read this story, you're going to find it is extraordinarily well researched, such that, God, it would take me days, maybe weeks, to walk through and see if what they're saying here is wrong. I have to assume, given the level of detail that they've gone into, that someone actually researched it and it's a reasonable story. Again, it's filled with a lot of emotionally loaded language, some filler, some opinion, but if you just look at who they're talking about, the research they did on the individuals, it is clear that they were on the right. So part of coming into contact with reality is not believing every single conspiracy theory that you may happen to hear about how it was all Antifa and how they bust all these Antifa people. You know what bothers me more than anything else about when they say somebody bust in all these people? Okay, I tried this once. I actually tried this once online with somebody. They said, they said they were at an event and they saw these buses pulling in, and a bunch of bad guys got out. And I said, dude, oh my God, you're in the right place at the right time. Here's what you do. You need to go out there and sit with your car behind those buses because they're parked right now. They came and dropped these people off. They're going to go drop them somewhere else. What you need to do is sit behind them. Wait for people to show up and then tail the buses. You need to tail these buses. You need to see where these people go, where they're dropping them off. Follow some of them home. You're perfect. You're in the perfect position. You're right there. Do it. Nobody ever does that. If it was me and I saw that, first damn thing I would do would be sit quietly and tail people. Find out who they are, where they live, how they got together. You know, all of this stuff. Nobody ever does it. What are you all freaking cowards? Are you just too stupid to think of the obvious? What? You know, I can't believe that these people are all getting bussed in unless somebody actually follows them around and figures out who they are and where they came from. Maybe they're just bust people because it was a bunch of right-wing people. Who the hell knows? But if you think that you're there on the ground, you think these are bad guys who've been bussed in, tail them home. It's just so obvious to me. Let's see. Yeah, Drop 2 says, is the Senate still in Republican hands? No, they lost it in Georgia. It is now the legislative and executive branches are controlled by Democrats. They have pretty much free reign to do anything that they want. It will depend, on how much of a pushback they get from Republicans. But really, when you got Nancy Pelosi banning use of standard pronouns and saying we're not going to talk about wives and husbands and all that anymore, when she just, by the way, today did it, described herself as a wife and a grandmother and blah, 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 in defiance of the rules that they just passed. When you got that level of crazy in there, then clearly they've got enough clout to do a lot of the stuff they want to get done. We have to worry very much about what they're going to do. Freedom 557, let's see. Drop 2 says Lenin and Trotsky were funded by U.S. banks. I don't know enough about the history to know that for sure, but it's certainly possible. Read some Anthony Sutton books. Okay, I'll take a look at some of that. Marshall says, a touchstone to see if you're obsessed. Name 5 things your opponent has done that's good. Then name 5 things that your side has done that's bad. If either number is 0, 1, or 2, seek help. Yeah, nobody is perfect. I'm a libertarian, right? My party, if I was going to look at the Libertarian Party, I'm not really a member of the Libertarian Party. I realized that it was a pointless waste of time a while ago. But if I was going to look at the Libertarian Party, I could say, okay, well, I think they're doing this right. Their biggest problem is you can't get them to agree to do anything. I often say that, getting libertarians to agree to do anything is like herding cats. Everybody thinks that they know the exact right way to do things. And even though they all have some principles in common, you cannot get them together to even work on those principles. That is the biggest problem with the Libertarian Party. And if you're not in contact with reality, you don't see it. But I gave up on them a long time ago because it's like trying to herd cats. It's ridiculous. So that is my message for the people on the right. Please come back to reality. The election is done. Whether it was stolen or not, it's over. There's no point worrying about it. Coup was nonsense. There's no point worrying about it. You need to come away from all the conspiracy theories and recognize that your side did, in fact, have some part in this thing last week. You are here, and it is now. You can't be dealing with this other stuff. What we have to deal with now is, what are the Democrats going to do to frack us all up? Because they want to. They don't think they want to, but they want to. I've heard cats, you need a lot of tuna. Oh, you couldn't get enough tuna for that. There's no analog to tuna in the Libertarian Party. I see it all the time on Facebook, on Twitter. You get libertarians talking to each other, and one will accuse. It's always the same thing. You're not a real libertarian because you don't think exactly the same way I do. Constantly, you're not a real libertarian. You're not a real libertarian. You're not a real libertarian. You're not. It's just constant. You can't even get them to agree on basic principles and work toward it. Creates a cat riot, mostly a racist riot. Yeah, it doesn't fortunately come to blows most of the time, although I know it has. But yeah, you can't get them to do anything. That's the biggest problem with libertarians. You can't get them to do anything, to work together to actually get something done. It's the ginger cats that suffer the most. Well, maybe a ginger cow. Who knows? Get the South Park reference. So, I tell you what, it's coming up on 3 hours, midnight my time. So, I think we're going to let it drop off there. Speciesist, Marshall says. Yeah. So, I think I'm going to let it drop off there before my lower back arthritis makes it so it's hard to sleep through the night. So that is all that I have to say about that. I would love to keep the conversation going, so please leave your comments, questions, and nasty remarks. I'll do my best to respond to you. So thanks for watching. That is all the time that we have today for this episode of Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.